I grew up an only child, just me and my mom. She had me at an early age, 19.
In the 1980s, Monty Smith is an only child, growing up in Okmulgee, Oklahoma. His dad is not present in his life, so his mom is everything to Monty.
She was about 5'1", little woman, but she was spicy. Straight to the point with me. She's like, I'm not gonna let you grow up be a bad kid. I'm gonna be telling you what's right and wrong. She was good at that.
He was very close to his mom. That was his rock. I have childhood memories of Monty and I, playing in the backyard while our mothers were inside, doing their thing.
Monty's mother is in ill health for most of his childhood with kidney disease.
My mom was on dialysis for my whole life. 3 days a week, we had to go to the hospital, and for 8 hours of time for her to do dialysis. She was a very strong woman, though. She still, was able to hold a job down, too.
He was going to school. He was at home, making sure his mom had what she needed or they needed. He definitely had to grow up a lot faster than the rest of us.
Whenever Monty gets the chance, he heads to the basketball court with his best friend, Jermaine.
Basketball was a big thing, so we played basketball nonstop. Everybody wanted to be the star player, the most popular.
We always had a ball in our hand. For Monty, it was strictly basketball. He was a very good basketball player.
After graduating from high school, Monty attends college, but he and Jermaine still have time to play ball. This is how they meet Monty's first love, Tabitha Lynch, in 1993.
Tabitha and Monty grew close very quickly. The way that they looked at each other, I could tell that was his first love.
We were a magnet towards each other. I did kind of feel like I, was a lucky guy because we just always had a good time together no matter what we did. There was never any arguing, just had fun all the time.
After dating for 3 years, Monty and Tabitha eventually drift apart.
She was in college playing basketball, and so was I. She was at a different school, so we didn't get to see each other a lot.
I know life happens, but I would have definitely liked to have seen them stay together back in those days. That was definitely the one that got away from Monty.
After college, Monty becomes a mechanic and gets married. But 10 years later, as his mother's health deteriorates, so too does his marriage.
Monty, of course, wanted to be around his mother more, definitely played a role in his relationship with his wife.
After me and my wife had split up, my mother had a stroke. And then there was, just her health just went quickly.
It took a rough toll, and it took a toll on him mentally.
But the day that I found out that she passed, I was on a motorcycle ride out of town. That was a hard moment, and I was crying inside my helmet. Yeah, I felt empty after my mom's gone, I was just trying to get through one day at a time and hide my emotions from everybody, I worked as much as I could. I developed this new passion for motorcycles. So I just, get on my bike and ride when I could. That was my escape.
On Halloween night in 2010, Monty's life begins looking up when he attends a party at a local club.
So we walk in, there was a lot of good costumes there. I was standing there and someone just kind of grabbed me by my shirt, and before I can get a chance to see what was happening, I was being pulled onto the dance floor, and then never even faced me. She's just looking the other way and dancing with me. I didn't know what to think about her at first. I was like, that's kind of aggressive approach right there. So then that song was over, and I walked over to the stand by the bar area, and then she came with me. I said, my name's Monty. And she said, oh, my name's Shayna.
Shayna Sims is a 22-year-old hairstylist.
She was about the same height as me, and that's kind of tall for a woman. She had dark hair, pretty face. There we just kept talking. She stayed by my side for the rest of the night. That was a nice feeling to have a pretty girl like that interested in me, because I was kind of feeling down on myself a little bit, right before that happened. We went back to her house. I spent the night there with her the first night, just talking and hanging out till the sun came up.
The relationship moves quickly, and a few months later, in January 2011, they move in together.
It was never a dull moment, I'll say that. We had fun, did a lot of things together.
I remember him being excited when he told me that he had met Shayna and how he lit up when he talked about Shayna originally.
The next thing I know, we started talking about, well, maybe we should get married.
Just a few weeks later, Monty surprises Shayna with a ring.
So we're at dinner. I waited for the right moment, and then I got down on one knee. I asked her, to marry me, and she said yes. I put the ring on her finger. She just was very excited and happy.
He was all in on this relationship, and this is what he wanted. She seemed to be feeling the same way, so I was very supportive.
We had decided to get married at the Tulsa Historical Society. She did all the prep work herself, which I was kind of amazed by that. I was really nervous, but from the moment that I seen her come out, and I seen that smile on her face, it felt right. Everybody was encouraging to us. It was a great day.
He wanted to be the husband and the father and the family man that he never had. So he very much looked forward to that.
I had came home from work one day and she had this smile on her face. And I'm like, what are you smiling about? So I think I remember her saying, come here, I want to show you something. So she showed me the pregnancy test. It showed positive and I felt happy, excited to be a dad.
As an expectant father, Monty is fully invested in Shayna having a healthy pregnancy. So he is surprised and concerned one day when he becomes aware of a potential problem.
We had a doctor's appointment, just normal routine. The doctors came into the room and told us they did not support my mother taking pain medication during pregnancy.
Shayna, who had been complaining of leg pain, has been self-medicating for months with Percocet and Lortabs, both highly addictive opioids.
She went to a pain specialist doctor, and I was unaware of this. So I was at work at this time, so I'm pretty sure that she did not tell them that she was pregnant, and they proceeded to help her with her pain level.
Her obstetrician has become aware of Shayna's drug use through routine lab tests.
They could not help her anymore, that she needed to look for another doctor to help deliver her baby. I was furious. I can't believe that you could endanger your child like that. I found the medication in her purse, confronted her. I said, you're not taking any more of these right now because I'm taking them from you. So you can't have these anymore.
Monty's daughter is born 6 months later.
She came out, she heard my voice and stopped crying and opened her eyes and looked for me. At that moment, our bond was created. She's healthy, no problems whatsoever. I was very happy about that, and that the things that her mom had done early on did not affect her. Shayna seemed happy to be a new mom again to this pretty little girl. At that point, we had a good relationship pretty much. After my daughter was just a few months old, I switched to night shift on my job. So 3 in the evenings till midnight, working hard to provide as much as I can for my family since I'm the only one working right now.
While Monty works, he believes his baby daughter is tucked safely in bed during his shift. But he is wrong.
I would come home at midnight. I would notice that she's just getting home right when I am and bringing my daughter in the house, out of the car seat. She hadn't been home all evening long. She just said, I'm out running errands. It's okay. She said, I don't see anything wrong with that. I told her that she shouldn't be out with my daughter all evening long, that she needed to be home in the bed. I started to become more aggravated. We had a lot of arguments.
One night, Monty arrives home to find Shayna in bed, although she's not quite alone.
She's passed out. Her phone is laying face up on the bed and is on FaceTime with some other young man that I do not know. I couldn't believe it.
And I started seeing the signs from Shayna that maybe she wasn't the person that she's seeming to be. She became very evil very quickly.
Monty Smith has just found his wife Shayna in bed and on FaceTime with another man.
I look at the phone, she's passed out, unaware that I'm even right there looking at her phone. No clue. A lot of things went through my mind. But number one was, how could you? My daughter's right there in the other room. The next day, I brought it up and talked to her about it. And she said, well, I don't remember that. Denial.
Monty did mention a lot that Shayna would just lie about nothing, lie to be lying.
I was pretty upset, pretty angry. At this point, the trust is gone.
When I hear these things, myself, I'm thinking, Monty, you got to do something about this before it gets worse.
And indeed, things do get worse.
One day we have an argument. She's, not letting me go out the door. I said, I have to go to work. Excuse me, move out of my way. And then she says, you're not going to touch me. If you do, you're going to go to jail. And I said, what do you mean by that?
This is when Shayna reveals just how low she will sink to get her own way.
She's like, well, because you're black. And they're going to take you to jail before they with me. After her saying that to me, I was really, really done. And I wanted to just leave.
They do have a daughter together. That was the main reason for Monty wanting to stay. He wanted to not have a broken home. So he made his decisions to stay.
Soon, Shayna's erratic behavior escalates outside the home.
Monty had taken Shayna to go tan. He stayed outside in the car with the baby.
Unbeknownst to Monty, while inside, Shayna overreacts to something trivial and flies off the handle.
While he was sitting in the car with the baby, 2 police cars pulled up outside the tanning salon. He said, hey man, I think something's happening. And yeah, she was having a scene inside the tanning salon, ended up, cursing out some ladies that worked there, and they called the cops, and, they eventually, kicked her out. It was at that point I told him, I said, hey man, I love you, brother, but you need to figure this out.
I had friends that I had confided in about my problems at home. They just kind of let me know how messed up the situation was that I was in and what am I going to do next.
Around November 2014, an ex-girlfriend reaches out to Monty on social media. Her name is Christina Perez.
We had said hello to each other on Facebook. I think she may have asked, what my situation was, and probably told her, I was unhappy.
Monty and Christina do not meet in person, but continue to chat occasionally online until Shayna finds out.
So I came home from work one day, and Shayna asked me who this Christina girl was, and I was like, oh gosh, here we go.
Shayna thought that Christina was the enemy and was trying to take her man.
She was mad about this situation that she thought was going on, so I am accused of having an affair with Christina.
The situation escalates when Shayna tracks down Christina's home and her place of work.
She's showing up at Christina's job, sitting outside, and it's getting more and more aggressive, their tone every day.
And then it blew up from there.
One day when I got home from work, they were talking to each other, and I could hear Christina on speakerphone saying, "I know what you did to my car, and I'm calling the police." Shayna had slashed Christina's tires. I mean, I'm blown away. I'm thinking to myself, who is this person?
She was slashing this woman's tires. She was following this woman. She was doing all these crazy things to this woman who had dated her husband 5 years ago.
I couldn't believe it. It first started out, with Shayna acting out in public and then escalating to slashing someone's tires. What's next? At that point, I knew that Shayna was crazy.
After the tire slashing, it's just getting worse and worse each day. They're making threats towards each other at this point.
Christina doesn't retaliate, and Monty stops contacting her. But things come to a head when Shayna decides to file a protective order against Christina.
We go to the courthouse. I'm with her, me and my daughter. We're sitting in the lobby just waiting. I looked down the hallway and saw Christina.
By chance, Christina is at the courthouse as well to file a protective order against Shayna.
And of course, they gave each other mean looks. And the next thing I know, they're walking towards each other. And my wife is holding my daughter. And they wanted to exchange words with each other. And then they swung at each other. As soon as they throw punches at each other, I'm grabbing my daughter out of harm's way. My daughter's crying. It was quite intense. The deputies came out and separated everybody. They took them back in the holding areas until they figure out what happened.
And thank goodness there was tape. So the deputies pull it, and of course they see Christina is innocent, that Shayna has purposefully knocked into this woman and then starts screaming about Christina attacking her.
They realized that the child had been endangered in this encounter. So my wife was charged with child endangerment.
Shayna is put on probation for a year, and Christina is granted a protective order against her.
I did feel trapped in this, I'm not gonna call it a marriage anymore. I felt trapped in this situation. But because my daughter's involved in this, and I can't just take off.
Monty doesn't hear from Christina again. Meantime, out of the blue, a few months later, Monty gets a message from another girlfriend from his past, Tabitha Lynch, his first love.
She had contacted me through Facebook and said, "Hey, how's it going?" We chatted a little bit and then exchanged a number to talk. Her contacting me was kind of like a breath of fresh air. It was nice to hear from her and, see how she was doing in her life.
It's been over 20 years since Monty and Tabitha dated each other. Tabitha is divorced with 2 children of her own.
I didn't know all the details going on in her life at this time, but she just, told me that she had kids and they were doing good. And once she found out that I was having problems with my wife, she's like, "I'd like to reach out to her and talk to her." I just didn't think it was a good idea. I didn't know what to expect from Shayna. I was like, "No, it's okay. I got this under control. I'm gonna handle it my way." But one day after returning home from work, I walked to the door and Shayna was upset. She's like, "Tabitha has reached out to me and said that you and her have been talking and that I'm a terrible mom and a terrible wife." And so she asked me, "Who's this bitch?"
Shayna was very angry because she felt that Tabitha was a threat.
She can't stop victimizing people. I would say she is one of the most bizarre people I've ever covered in 31 years of covering crime.
Shayna was very jealous, very vindictive, very evil.
Shayna Smith is enraged when she receives a warning message from her husband Monty's former girlfriend, Tabitha Lynch.
Tabitha did send a message to Shayna, basically telling her that, she's losing the best thing that she could ever have, and she needs to change her ways before she screws it up.
Shayna took that as disrespect and did not like what she heard, because it's coming from another woman. And she asked me, are y'all messing around? And I said, no.
Shayna is determined to have it out with Tabitha face to face, but she can't seem to locate her.
She's constantly asking me where to find her at. I said, I don't know. I was kind of worried about these two women having the interaction with each other because I don't know what Shayna's capable of.
But Shayna never gets the chance to confront Tabitha because one day, Tabitha suddenly becomes critically ill.
Tabitha had started having some health issues, and eventually she went into the hospital and didn't make it out.
2 months after reconnecting with Monty, Tabitha dies unexpectedly from natural causes.
Tabitha was like a sister to me, so it hurt me deeply.
I was like, I can't believe it. It seemed like I just talked to her just the other day and everything was fine.
Monty consoles himself that at least she's out of harm's way from Shayna.
I told Shayna that Tabitha passed away. She acted cold and heartless. She didn't care. The next words out of her mouth were, "Oh, good. That's what that bitch gets." My jaw hit the floor. I couldn't believe it. I just heard her say that about Tabitha's death. I was already emotionally removed. I was ready to be physically removed. I didn't want to know her anymore.
The viewing for Tabitha Lynch is held in April of 2015 at a funeral chapel in East Tulsa.
I was there Thursday afternoon, probably between 1 and 2 o'clock. It hurt my heart. It was like a member of my family had passed away.
As the viewing ends, the family is taking a break outside when a stranger slips inside, presumably to pay her last respects.
Tabitha's mother happens to see this woman who looks like she's going and actually reaching into the casket. Something seems odd. It's reported to other family members. That woman is now gone, but the family goes to inspect Tabitha's body, and clearly her body has been touched. She's got a straight, cut right from the top of her head, right close to the bridge of her nose.
Her hair's been cut, and then her pants have been pulled down, her outfit has been pulled down. Her shoes that were specially made just for her that were in her casket, they're now gone. Everybody, they're just in shock. You realize that some crazy woman has come in here and desecrated this body.
Here you've got just absolute pandemonium unfolding. It's just, you can't put into words how devastating that was for this victim's family to just see.
There is one thing that we always hold sacred in this country, and that is how you treat a person who's passed away. And this just violated every tenet of that for sure.
Tabitha's family place a call to the police.
This is never a call you ever get, ever. And it just gets crazier from there.
And so the officers at that time, when they got there, they see Tabitha, they see a disheveled body lying in a casket. They see that the makeup is messed up. They see that the incision on her face. And those are all really unusual things. Those are things that should not have happened and that the officers were shocked to see. It feels like the crime was a personal attack on this person. They start taking photographs, they start collecting evidence, looking around, looking at the body, making observations.
And down next to the casket, there's hair. Tabitha's hair has been cut, and there's some of the hair laying on the ground.
While police are processing the crime scene at the funeral home, another call is placed to dispatch from Tabitha's family, who are now at her apartment.
They learned that the suspect may possibly be at the apartment.
They're reporting, we think this person who was just down at the funeral home is over at our house, and we need to get somebody over here right now.
Hours earlier, Monty Smith receives a disturbing message from Shayna.
I opened it up and looked at it, and It was a picture of Tabitha in her casket. I was very shocked to see her with this picture. I didn't understand why. Why do you have this picture? You know, where did you get this from? And then she also said, that bitch looks ugly in her casket. I can't believe you're messing with her. I was confused. I didn't know what she meant by that.
Once Monty finds out what Shayna has done, his life will never be the same.
It's beyond me, you know, why she would do what she did.
I've seen a lot of strange cases in my 31 years, and this one takes the cake. So many twists and turns along the way, and then it became frightening and more bizarre. It just became crazy.
After receiving the pictures from Shayna, Monty Smith returns home to find her in a frenzied state.
Shayna says, take your daughter out of the car and grab her car seat too. After I took my daughter out, she drove off. It left me and my daughter sitting there. This was probably about 5:30 in the evening. Had no clue where she was going.
It's 7:30 p.m. when police arrive at Tabitha's apartment.
They meet a bunch of Tabitha's family outside in the parking lot. And at that point, Tabitha's family tells them, there's someone inside our apartment and we didn't invite her in.
It's a heightened level of tension for the family members. It's like she's inside.
They learned that this woman had showed up at the door of Tabitha Lynch's apartment. She says, my name's Stephanie, and I'm here because something happened to your mother's makeup at the funeral home.
The woman claims she wanted a photo of Tabitha in order to fix her makeup.
And so she makes up this ruse to get inside the apartment, and at some point, the family kind of gets suspicious. So the police go inside the apartment, and what they find is this disheveled, jittery-looking woman who appears out of place. She doesn't seem like she belongs there.
Police search the suspect and discover incriminating evidence.
They find a knife and a box cutter in her pockets. They find some hair in her pocket, and so it was apparent to them at that point that this person was related to what had happened at the funeral home. A few of the family members recognized this girl who identified herself as Stephanie as actually Shayna Sims. And when they start talking to police officers, they tell them that Shayna is actually the wife of Monty Smith, and Monty is a longtime friend of Tabitha Lynch.
Monty is putting his daughter to bed when his phone rings.
It was Shayna. Her voice was shaky. She's telling me, come save her. Then the next thing, I heard voices in the background, and she was telling them to stop and let her go. And they said, no, you're not going anywhere. And I was like, who's that in the background? What are you talking about? And she said, I'm at your dead bitch's house. You can't be. What do you mean? So I got my daughter up and I drove to Tabitha's home. As I'm driving over there, I'm still trying to wrap my head around what all just happened. And then once I arrived there, it was already chaos at that point. They have Shayna in the police car. As soon as they open the car door, she's trying to tell me that she's being accused of messing with Tabitha's body and that they're saying that she's, stole some stuff from them. She did not. That's why I told them to close the door. I didn't want to hear anymore.
Police believe Shayna wanted to break into Tabitha's apartment to steal a personal item she could keep as a trophy. The next day, the Tulsa media seizes on the story.
We immediately went to the scene to try to figure out what on earth was happening. And just what we learned that day, nobody in their right mind would go into a funeral home and do these terrible things to someone who's already passed away. Because what threat are they at that point?
Shayna's act of desecration is so unusual that police are hard-pressed to find the correct laws with which to charge her.
They initially charged her with burglary because she had entered the apartment under false pretenses. They charged her with illegal dissection because that was essentially the closest thing they could find to coming up with that cut on Tabitha's face.
They told me what she was being charged with, and I'm blown away. 100% total shock.
That is a whole new level of crazy. It's way beyond anything that I could ever imagine someone doing.
It seems impossible, but things actually get crazier.
My sergeant came in and said, "Hey, I got a message from the funeral home that we need to go out and take a look at the body again." I grabbed one of my detective partners and my sergeant, and we went out there. So when we examined the body, we found that Tabitha's breasts had been crudely cut out of her body. We also noticed that one of her toes was missing. I had, at that point, worked hundreds of homicides as a crime scene detective, and I had not ever seen anything like this.
The investigators talk with Monty, who shows them the photographs that Shayna had texted him the previous day. They are the equivalent of a smoking gun.
So I see a hand holding a knife next to a toe. I recognize that as probably Tabitha's foot. And I see there's photographs of a hand next to what I assume to be Tabitha's genitalia. And I realize that I'm looking at photographs of Shayna in the act, committing these heinous acts at the funeral home.
I was disturbed, kind of, heartbroken. Couldn't believe that she did this to someone that I knew and that had passed away. A total disrespect.
How are you going to explain those photos? I mean, that just kind of seals her fate. Pictures of what she's actually doing.
When the case goes to trial in April 2016, Shayna is charged with 3 misdemeanors and 2 felonies.
A woman accused of slashing the body of her husband's former girlfriend is expected in court today.
This is a case that is revenge. This is the ex getting involved with her husband, and so she's going to do something about that.
I don't remember any emotion from Shayna. The defense had tried very early on in the process to say she wasn't competent to stand trial because she's got, mental issues, but she was given a thorough exam. That was part of her pre-trial process, and she was found competent to stand trial. The defense were like, look, she's just a woman pushed over the edge like any woman would be. Her husband's having an affair, the victim is texting her and rubbing her face in it. What else would a woman do?
The prosecution call a number of witnesses, including Monty.
Seeing Shayna in the courtroom and being asked questions, and she's staring at me, trying to intimidate me. I answer the questions and try to get through it.
And then the jury goes out. It's right before lunchtime. It's like 11:45 in the morning. And I didn't think it would take too long. So 3 hours later, almost to the minute, they called us back in the courtroom, and that's when the verdict was read.
They found her guilty of all the counts. All those counts were ordered to run consecutive. It all totaled up to 16 total years.
I guess you could say I felt a kind of peace.
Monty divorces Shayna a year later and gets full custody of their daughter.
I can't imagine, what he had to go through, what he had to tell his daughter, all the ramifications of that. That's tough.
Less than 4 years into Shayna's sentence, a new law is struck in Oklahoma that gives her a loophole to appeal.
Shayna Sims has been released from prison after serving 4 years of her sentence.
I was like, she can't be. There's no way. I couldn't believe it. I was in shock.
It was just a gut punch to everybody.
It was devastating to me when I found out. I felt rage at that point. I couldn't believe it.
In November 2021, Monty Smith's ex-wife Shayna Sims is set free, less than 4 years into a 16-year sentence for desecrating Tabitha Lynch's body.
I was like, she can't be. There's no way. But sure enough, I did get confirmation message later that day that she was released. I actually saw a video of her being released.
She just gets to walk. She spends a few years in prison for all the damage she's caused, and she gets to walk.
You couldn't ask for a more devastating blow to the victim's family.
It was a shock It was really a kick in the gut that we learned that she was going to be walking free after we put this case together. And to have someone walking free was tough to swallow.
Shayna has been released on appeal as a result of a Supreme Court ruling known as the McGirt decision.
The McGirt decision, in essence, basically told Oklahoma if somebody was a Native American, either as a defendant or as a victim, that the state of Oklahoma had no jurisdiction to handle those prosecutions.
The United States Supreme Court said that the state of Oklahoma can't arrest Native Americans, our prosecutors can't prosecute crimes involving Native Americans, and so that brought into question thousands and thousands of cases over the years where a Native American was either a victim or a suspect.
This new law is supposed to protect Native Americans.
But what did Shayna Sims do? She figured out that Tabitha had Native American blood in her. You can't prosecute me for this crime. And literally, she got her case dismissed because of that McGirt decision. Shayna Sims, somebody has zero Native American blood in her, gets the benefit of victimizing somebody who was a Native American and walks around as though she's got no consequences. It's just so upsetting.
Once Shayna is out of jail, she can't seem to stay out of trouble.
Monty was worried about what she might do. Of course, the victim's family, Tabitha's family, was really worried and stressed about what she might do or who she might target. She gets arrested for stealing a car, then gets in trouble for assaulting her mother. It's just one thing after another. Monty's big concern was protecting his daughter, because now that she's free, what would stop her from trying to get custody?
I got a phone call from Shayna wanting to speak with her daughter. I did not know, I couldn't believe it. I was in shock. I ignored it for the first few days. She kept calling.
He didn't know what her plans were or what she was capable of doing now that she's out of jail.
Monty talks with their daughter, who tells him she wants to meet her mother. He drops her off for a weekend at her grandmother's house, where Shayna is staying.
Thought to myself, give it a try just one time to see how it goes. Shayna and her mom, they were yelling at each other and having confrontation in front of my daughter when she's not used to seeing that. And she told me herself that she didn't want to be around that, and she didn't want to see them. So I did not force her at that point to go back anymore. And that's where we are to this current day.
Monty still has full custody of his daughter. So yes, he, was doing his best to keep his daughter safe, to keep Shayna away.
Despite being warned about not going anywhere near Tabitha's relatives, Shayna defies the order.
And then, sure enough, Shayna then goes to the victim's family's apartment, and she's like, oh, I wasn't there to see them, which is a lie. You're only there to harass that poor family who's already been through so much. All you have to do to stay out of jail is stay over in your county. But she can't help herself again. She comes over here, and of course, that puts the family in terror. They are afraid of why she keeps showing up there and what she might do. And so, of course, yes, she's arrested and put back in.
Recognizing that Shayna is still a threat, Oklahoma state prosecutors file an appeal.
We had another case. It was called Castro Huerta, which was somebody who was clearly not a Native American, who had victimized children who were Native American. And we took that fact pattern back up to the United States Supreme Court and asked them to revisit, in essence, the McGirt decision. So then we immediately took that decision, petitioned the court, got her dismissal set aside, and remanded Shayna Sims back to prison, which is where she's at today.
In February 2023, Shayna's sentence and conviction are reinstated, and she is sent back to prison to serve the remaining 12 years.
So it's definitely a relief, for all of us that she's back in jail. Me personally, I don't think 16 years is long enough.
I'm at peace in my life. My daughter's at peace. She's happy. I've never let this be a problem for her.
Monty has this smile that whenever he's in good spirits, and it shows. He just glows. And I love to see my brother when he's happy and when everything is going good.
I feel like after all this is said and done, it's like looking at the damage after a tornado or after a disaster, and how are you gonna put your life back together after this?
I don't know of any person that could have withstanded what he had to go through, especially these past 6 or 7 years. But he didn't. I always love him for that.
I'm still in the stages of putting my life back together and moving forward. But it's built me to be a stronger person and better dad.
Midnight Desert, mile marker 42, a single headlight beam crawling over broken asphalt like a searchlight that has given up on the sky and started interrogating the earth. Wind shreds across the scrub. Saguaros stand like witnesses who swore to tell the truth and then went silent for 22 years. One bottle, one shoe, one smear of dust that looks like a fingerprint pressed by night itself. Headline tone in your ear, missing person, 2003. Last seen at a gas station on Highway 87, camera grainy, cashier bored, a receipt timestamp that would become a metronome for grief. Cold case, ice in the file drawer, dust in every sentence, family in limbo, police overtime, a town that carried a ghost the way a pocket carries a coin, always there, always tapping against the nerves. Then the alert you never thought you'd hear, solved. Arrest shocks community. The lines go hot, the desert inhales, but listen closer. Solved is a word and words can lie. Tonight we walk into the gap between verdict and truth. She was 19 with a smile that looked like it could pick a lock. She had a second-hand Honda and a first-rate habit of taking the long way home. She liked late-night radio where every caller sounded like a confession and every song left tire marks on memory. She texted a friend at 11:13 p.m., back roads, almost home, you up? And then the smoke of silence. In the morning, the sun rose and found nothing. No skid, no wreck, no goodbye. Arizona, 2003, heat already coiling up from the shoulder of the road as deputies knocked on doors for the first of 1,000 times. Her mother stood in the doorway, hugging a photo like it might shiver. The headline didn't say her name at first. It said, "Teen missing, puzzling disappearance. Authorities asking for tips." Tips arrived like weather, sudden, inconsistent, mostly wrong. A drifter did it. A boyfriend did it. A trucker did it. A stranger, always a stranger because it's easier to fear the nameless than to turn and look into a familiar face and see a crack running down the middle. They dragged a dry wash. They tossed a pond, the way a mind tosses a memory, hoping a surface gives back what it swallowed. Dogs sniffed, circles widening like rumors. Nothing. Detectives spread photos on a metal table that threw back their faces in warped reflections. The youngest detective carried innocence like a badge. By Christmas, he had traded it for coffee that kept him awake enough to dream of nothing but the case. The sergeant signed forms with the weight of a man adding bricks to a wall. The mother learned the grammar of waiting. Present tense for prayers, past tense for stories, future tense for calls that didn't come. A year turned into a bruise you could cover but not heal. A clerk remembered a man at the station. A cap. A jacket with a patch. A laugh that didn't match the words. The camera remembered more. A shape leaning in, a gesture that cut the air, a car pulling up behind the Honda, blocking the exit like an unspoken sentence. Investigators freeze-framed the pixels until the pixels answered back with static. They posted a still. They circled a shadow and called it a lead. The town shared it the way a crowd passes a bucket at a fire. Fervent, imprecise, necessary. A neighbor pointed at her screen and said, "That stance, I know that stance." The cops came by, took a statement, wrote down a name that made the room colder. He was local, he was polite. He was the guy who helped carry your box of groceries when your hands were full. He had a truck that matched, almost, if you squinted. If the light bent, if you were tired enough to want it. They asked him questions. He smiled carefully. He was the kind of man who washed his truck until it shone like an alibi. No probable cause, the law said. No arrest. Not yet. The case froze. Years peeled off the calendar like paint. Headlines aged and yellowed on the bulletin board. New tragedies shouldered in, loud and urgent. But this one sat in the back row like a quiet student who always turns in the homework. The mother learned anniversaries the way sailors learn tides. The detective with the innocents quit smoking and then started again. The sergeant retired, left a note on the file. There's a seam here. We haven't found the pull. The town changed its streetlights. The gas station changed ownership. The camera system updated. The old tapes boxed and stored in a space that smelled like cardboard and old rain. The saguaro grew an extra arm as if it were trying to hail a cab out of this story. Then, the drop. A new unit, new software, a new detective with a habit of seeing patterns the way others see weather. He fed the old footage to a machine that didn't sleep. He asked it to tell him secrets. The machine obliged in numbers, angles, silhouettes. A license plate ghosted through 2 frames like a whisper. Not enough. He layered it with a database of local work patches, modeled the curvature of a shoulder inside a jacket, found an overlap with a defunct county contractor whose roster had been archived, mislabeled, forgotten. He requested the roster. He combed it like a beachcomber for glint. A name came up. Ocean Wet. Familiar enough to raise goosebumps. That name. Still local, still polite, still helpful, still driving the same brand of truck years later, new paint, same habit of parking nose out as if he always wanted the fast exit. The detective watched him for a week without blinking. Routine built its own confession. The man's commute ran along the spine of the case like a finger over a scar. The detective waited. He didn't want probable. He wanted inevitable. A call for maintenance. County yard. Inventory audit. A welded locker. Heavy. Rusted shut. They cut it open and found a patchwork of tools, receipts, a map of back roads annotated in a hand that liked shortcuts. Tucked in a crease, a key. No one could place the key. The detective could. He had seen the make stamped on it in a photo from 2003, a blur on a key ring on a lanyard in a teenage hand, the day the Honda got its first oil change. A dealer had posted that photo on a bulletin years ago, the proud new owner grin. Composite the grin with the shadows from the gas station. Composite the key with the locker. Composite the man with the root, and your stomach says the word your mouth won't. Got him. They brought him in, not cuffs yet. A conversation, neutral room, neutral tone. He said he remembered the case. Everyone remembered that case. He said he had given the girl directions. He said he left first. He said he prayed for the family. He said he was happy they were still looking. The detective placed the old receipt between them. The time on the receipt matched the time on his time card. The time card showed a break he hadn't mentioned. The map from the locker unfolded on the table, a crease aligned with the road the girl never finished. The man smiled too long. The detective's silence became a mirror, and in it the man saw himself without the careful edits. He swallowed, the kind of swallow that sounds like a clock winding down. They searched his property, a shed with a lock, a freezer that had rusted through at the corner, chemical stains under a workbench that would later light up under luminol like constellations. Nothing graphic, just a nervous galaxy of dots that suggested a history of cleaning, of erasing. In the garden, under a flagstone, a phone, her phone, the kind the early 2000s loved, with a cracked screen still sleeping with secrets inside. Forensics coaxed it awake. Call log in fossil form, last outgoing to voicemail. Last incoming, an unknown number that matched his disposable cell, a relic he had kept in a drawer for old notes. He said it was coincidence. The detective said to save the word coincidence for birthdays and bingo. The press conference broke the town's noon in half, microphones like a bouquet of snakes, badges tight against chests. Arrest made, the chief said. A long-awaited development, the mayor added. Cameras flashed like lightning without rain. In the back, the mother stood with her hands knit together like she was holding an invisible rope to keep from falling. The headline wrote itself, Arizona, 2003 cold case solved, arrest shocks community. The commenters applauded. The commenters doubted. The radio reopened the wound. Podcasters arrived with questions like scalpels. The detective did not celebrate. He sat with the file and read it again, from birth to the newest breath, looking for the seam the old sergeant had mentioned. When you declare something solved, the ground should stop moving. He felt it shift. Because nothing recovered the Honda. Nothing recovered what the desert had hidden. The suspect's eyes stayed dry, too dry, as if he had practiced grief in the mirror and decided against it. He gave alibis that could be checked against clocks and cameras and always missed by a minute. He named witnesses who had moved away, died, dissolved into new lives with new last names. He said he bought the phone at a yard sale. He said the key must have been planted. He said the map was a general map. It wasn't his fault if the creases intersected with pain. The detective slept badly, dreams full of shoulder patches and tire treads. He asked the lab to go back over the shed, the freezer, the flagstone. He asked them to retell the story in numbers and chemicals. He asked the machine for one more secret. Late at night, he drove the route. Gas station ghost lit like a movie set after the actors have gone home. Mile marker 42, with its paint bruised by time. He pulled onto the shoulder and killed the lights. The desert talked. Owls negotiated the dark. Far out, a freight train dragged a thread of sound across the horizon. He imagined the Honda here, 11:27 p.m., radio throwing out a chorus that had already fallen off the charts by the time anyone cared to notice. He imagined the truck behind her, nose-out man behind the wheel, following, passing, slowing, a silent choreography that ended in a turnout where the night is deep enough to swallow a scream. He imagined wrong. He had to, because imagining right would be a kind of surrender. The file said solved, his bones said wait. The arraignment came. The courtroom smelled like cold wood and hot coffee. Reporters filled the benches with the patience of vultures, elegant, grim. The man stood in a suit that fit like a confession, too tight in the shoulders, too smooth across the chest. The charges were read. He said not guilty in a voice that reached the back row and set a glass of water trembling. The mother looked at the man the way a lighthouse looks at a storm, steady, unblinking, knowing some ships won't be saved. The detective watched the jury pool file in, ordinary citizens drafted into a story that would eat their sleep. He watched their faces as they scanned the room for answers and found only questions dressed as facts. Outside, the town argued with itself. Some said case closed, some said careful. Old friends became cold acquaintances. The gas station changed the bulbs over pump 3 as if brighter light could rewrite memory. A mural appeared on a cinder block wall. Her eyes, the desert, the words never forgot. Candles, balloons, chalk messages that the wind smudged into pastel sorrow. Cold case solved, the mayor repeated for the camera. Unsolved things don't ghost a town like this, someone muttered. But they do. They always do. And in a basement 2 blocks from the courthouse, a box no one had opened in years yawned after a flood of cleaning and gave up a tape labeled with the wrong date, the wrong case, the wrong everything. The custodian set it aside. The detective, who had learned to pick up what the world set down, slid it into a player that whined like an old dog. The screen flickered. A frame from the gas station, a reflection in the glass door, another car, a different make, a shape that had not been cataloged, a second shadow overlapping the suspect's shadow, 2 orbits, 2 bodies, a choreography that the story never included. The detective leaned in. The seam was not a myth. It was right there, running under the words solved like a fault line. The arrest stood. The headline held. But the voice in your ear tightens, drops, says what the town won't. Done is not done. Solved is not safe. Closure is a headline that keeps printing itself until someone feels brave enough to read the small type. We are not at the end. We are not anywhere near it. The desert that swallows also returns, sometimes slowly, sometimes as a whisper on a tape, mislabeled by a tired hand. Tonight the wind is picking up. Tonight the saguaro lifts another green arm, pointing toward a road no one will admit they missed. Stay with me. The next turn is unmarked, and the sign we need is buried in sand. The tape clicks like a metronome for dread, and the screen blooms with the pallor of old footage, the kind that turns everything into a rumor of itself. Grain walks across the image. The gas station door, a rectangle of fluorescent fatigue. The suspect's truck, familiar as a recurrence, idling at pump 3. And then the ghost in the glass, second silhouette, second engine's hum printed as light, another car nosing the edge of the frame like a question that never raised its hand. Cold case anomaly. Secondary vehicle. The kind of detail that can tilt a verdict or split it into fragments sharp enough to cut through certainty. The detective kills the room lights and leans forward until his breath fogs the screen. The tape hisses. A shadow shifts. The door opens, closes. A sliver of reflection becomes a confession without words. There wasn't just one orbit around her that night. There were 2. He replays the sequence until time feels elastic. Frame by frame, stop, back, forward, stop. The suspect, jacket with a patch, moves in a pattern he already memorized. The second reflection delays, then mirrors, then diverges. 2 men, 1 man and a passenger, or just bad glass, dirty angles, a coincidence made of pixels and hope. He prints the frames, tapes them to the wall next to maps and names and the roster from the defunct contractor, and the wall breathes like a chest filling with air for the first time in years. He calls the lab, he calls the DA, he doesn't call the mother, not yet. You don't call a lighthouse to say the storm might have shifted, you wait until you can point at the wave. Morning prize opened the town with the gentlest crowbar, sun on pickup hoods, sprinklers ticking across small lawns, kids slinging backpacks, the daily amnesia that keeps a place alive. The courthouse revs for another day of staged truth. Arrest shocks community, the anchors say again, as if repeating the line will staple it to reality. In the coffee shop, two regulars who once coached Little League together now stir their cups in hostile silence. One thinks the man is guilty, one thinks the cops needed a win. Both think about their daughters without saying so. The mural of her eyes faces east, catching the first light, and the chalk offerings have been swept into pale halos that look like smudged halos or tread marks depending on your mood. The detective drags a rolling chair across the basement floor, shriek, echo, and turns the evidence room into a newsroom of the dead. He spreads out the stills, snaps chalk lines between the gas station's reflective glass and the turnout at mile marker 42, threads the tape's time code through the receipt's timestamp and the suspect's time card like a needle through multiple layers of denim, and then he steps back. The board looks like a headline exploded and rearranged itself as a constellation. Second vehicle, he says to the empty room, the way a doctor whispers a diagnosis before turning to face a family. He makes the call. The lab tech talks in tinny bursts, compression artifacts, internal reflections, luminance oscillations, as if science had borrowed the language of hauntings. Strip the jargon. A car existed in the glass that night, or it pretended to. The tech won't sanctify either option. He only promises probability. The detective accepts this with the clipped yes of a man who knows probability is a trap you're grateful to step into when the alternative is the void. He asks for enhancement, not because he trusts enhancement, but because everyone trusts pictures. They'll sand the footage down, smooth the static, sharpen the borders, run it until the pixels finally confess what they were always reluctant to say. Meanwhile, the detective goes hunting the old-fashioned way, door to door, call to call, cold case, warmed by friction. He revisits the cashier, now a manager, now careful with her memory like it's antique glass. She wants to help in capital letters. Help! She remembers the cap. She remembers the laugh that didn't match the words. She remembers another car, maybe. Or maybe she remembers remembering after years of listening to other people's versions. The detective lets the silence do the heavy lifting, and in that quiet, a detail crawls out. A smell, coolant and hot dust, twinned with citrus air freshener. The kind of scent that belongs to older cars trying to pass inspection by perfume. He writes it down. Smell doesn't get you a warrant, but it can guide your nose toward the next door. He walks the road between gas station and turnout. It's morning and the asphalt sizzles like a griddle already preheating for the afternoon. He stands where her car would have idled, where the suspect's truck would have shadowed, where the second car, if real, would have hovered just outside the story's official frame. He closes his eyes and listens. Tires hiss. A cicada ratchets up. A long haul throws a square shadow that slides over him like a curtain. The detective steps back onto gravel, a single bead of sweat tracking under his collar. The desert doesn't explain itself. It never has. It only offers you evidence in the language of mirage. Back downtown, the DA has the smile he uses for microphones sanded down to something that fits a closed-door meeting. You're telling me there's a second actor, he says. Not a man, not a driver, an actor. Like this is a story and he's the director trying to cut a scene. I'm telling you there's a second presence, the detective says, and the room chills half a degree. Presence is the wrong word. It sounds supernatural, too generous for a car that might be nothing but physics and bad glass. But he doesn't walk it back. His gut won't let him. They talk strategy. The DA hates variables. Juries hate surprise. The detective hates the idea of building a bridge with one missing rivet and telling people to cross. They agree to treat the second car as a ghost witness. Credible enough to track, not solid enough to introduce. Not yet. The suspect's lawyer, alert to tremors, files a motion that says the word tunnel vision, with the satisfaction of a magician revealing you were watching the wrong hand. He wants the locker evidence tossed. He wants the phone declared poisonous fruit. He wants the map to be nothing more than paper. He wants his client to be a man maligned by a community addicted to closure. Cold case hysteria, he calls it on the courthouse steps, and the cameras print the phrase because hysteria sells. The detective watches from the far side of the plaza, hands in pockets, jaw working like he's chewing gristle. The lawyer's tie is the color of new money. The suspect stands beside him, eyes careful, mouth set, the picture of a reasonable doubt you can frame above your mantle. At night, the detective opens the old interview logs like they're fossil beds. There, a roadside assistance report 2 days after the disappearance. A man with a stalled sedan on a feeder road that intersects nowhere and nothing. Recorded by a deputy who thought the guy was nervous. Noted a citrus smell in the car like someone tried to clean something or cover it. The license was a partial. The deputy rotated out the following year, then died in a rafting accident you could accuse of symbolism if you were the kind of narrator that liked to push it. The detective runs the partial through databases that didn't exist in 2003. He pairs it with census records, DMV renewals, car club forums where men trade tips for keeping old engines alive. He gets 3 hits. He circles one, local enough, poor enough to keep an old car, quiet enough to vanish in plain sight. He knocks at dusk because dusk invites confession. The house is a stucco rectangle with a yard taught to behave. The man who opens the door is 60, with a face that knows the feel of a hat brim. He recognizes the detective's posture, steps back, and the smell hits. Citrus, yes, and coolant, yes, but also the museum scent of old upholstery warmed by sun. On the wall, a faded calendar from 2003, pinned above a workbench like a mural to a year that never ended. The detective asks to talk. The man nods, and they sit at a table as clean as denial's conscience. You had trouble on a feeder road, the detective says. Long time ago. The man's eyes flick to a corner where memory keeps its own tools. He says the car overheated, he says a deputy helped, he says he was grateful, he says it easily. Too easily. When the detective asks where he was the night she disappeared, the man's mouth opens and closes, a silent film of uncertainty. He names a diner that burned down in 2011. He names a waitress who moved to Yuma. He names the ache in his knee like it might serve as an alibi. The detective walks the driveway and finds tire ghosts, the old car, and something heavier that parks here sometimes, nose out, as if the habit of quick exits spreads from man to man like a yawn. He notes the air freshener hanging from the rear view, a citrus tree that has lost its color to time. He notes a chip in the passenger door glass that would make reflections behave strangely, create double images, make a second car look like it's there when it isn't, or make one car look like two when there are two. He asks for permission to look under the hood. The man balks, thinks of his rights, remembers the deputy's kindness, nods. The detective peers in. New hoses on an old engine, lines too clean, clamps too recent, an archaeology that says someone did a careful refurb the year the case went public again. He thanks the man, leaves a card, says he'll be in touch. He will. In the morning, at night, whenever the space between solved and truth twitches. The mother watches the news with the sound off. Her house has learned to hum around the missing. Refrigerator, AC, a clock that ticks like a whisper. She folds laundry that doesn't belong to anyone anymore and then unfolds it and smooths it and folds it again. The camera crews came and went. Halos of light, hands on her doorknob like the case was a room they could step into. She gave the quotes because that's what mothers do when the world is tuned to the channel of grief. "We want answers," she said, and the anchor nodded like a priest. Tonight she stands in the kitchen and looks at the photo on the fridge and says the same thing. Not to the cameras, not to the detective, but to the air her daughter should be breathing. Answers, not headlines, not applause, not a solve that feels like a bandage on bone. The detective drives the reopening like a wedge. He calls the deputy's widow and listens to a story about a man who never stopped thinking he left something unfinished. He pulls an old radio log and finds a dead zone on the route that night, a gap where transmissions got swallowed and dispatch chalked it up to mountains and mood. He measures cell tower ranges from 2003, lines them up with the ping that never happened because the phone went dark under a flagstone that didn't yet exist. He pieces the geography into a cage, gas station, feeder road, turnout, shed, and now perhaps a second driveway where citrus hangs in the air like a caution tape made of scent. Back at the office, the enhancement arrives. The second reflection is real enough to have edges, not model, not make, not plate, but shape. Roofline low and straight, a boxier silhouette than the suspect's truck, a sedan that would have been common then and rare now. The lab draws a family of possibilities, lays them under the frame like transparencies until 2 or 3 align in a way that makes your scalp fizz. The detective tags the list, pulls DMV archives, filters for owners within an hour of the station, filters for men who had reason to be on that road and more reason to lie about it. The citrus man floats to the top like a leaf in a jar. He was there, or his car was there, or his reflection was there. Behind him, the suspect still looms. 2 orbits, 2 bodies, 1 disappearance that refuses to resolve into a single narrative. Pressure builds in the pipes. The DA wants clean lines. The defense wants mud. The chief wants a podium moment that doesn't crack in his hands. The detective wants the thing the old sergeant wrote on the file, the pull in the seam. He thinks about leverage. He thinks about who breaks first. Proud men do not snap. They bend, slowly, then suddenly. He thinks about the locker key, the phone, the map, the freezer's long rust. He thinks about the smell of coolant and citrus and memory. He knows the town is listening to its own footsteps again, measuring its trust against the echo. He knows solved is a word that now lives under glass, like a museum label beside an exhibit that might be misattributed. So he makes a choice that feels like kicking a door inside his own head. He knocks again on the citrus man's house, not with a warrant, not with backup, but with a proposition shaped like a headline. Another car that night. He lays the photos on the clean table. He watches the man's hands, not his face. The hands twitch, the eyes stay steady, the mouth borrows calm from an old supply. The man says he stopped for gas, saw nothing, heard nothing, went home. The detective asks why his hoses are new on an old engine. The man says he likes things tidy. The detective asks about the deputy who noted his nerves. The man says some people misread silence. The detective asks about the air freshener. The man laughs and says, "You ever ride around with a radiator like mine?" It's a good line. It's practiced. It lands. But the hands won't stop telling on him. On the way out, the detective pauses at the threshold and glances at the calendar nailed above the bench. September 2003, a picture of a lake no one swims in anymore. A circle drawn around the numbers 12 and 13. He files it away. He will check what those dates mean. He will ask whose birthdays landed on days that turned into nights that turned into headlines. He will keep walking this corridor of almosts and maybes and reflections until the second car becomes a person and the person becomes a voice and the voice breaks. Not because television needs a climax, not because the town wants a cleaner mural, but because the desert deserves its truth back. Outside, wind paws at the street, and somewhere a chime counts off the hours like evidence bags, 1, 2, 3. The gas station's new bulbs throw honest light, but honest light has never guaranteed honest answers. The tape keeps hissing in the basement. The frame with two silhouettes waits like a coin balanced on its edge, and the detective writes 3 words on an index card and pins it over everything else. Who else watched? Because someone always watches. Because cold cases don't freeze, they crystallize. Because even in a town veined with doubt, a witness sometimes survives as a smell, a chip in glass, a calendar with 2 dates and a circle that means everything and nothing until it suddenly means the door you were meant to open next. The index card burns on the board. Who else watched? 3 words that turn the room into a throat clearing before testimony. He starts with the obvious, the people paid to notice, night shift folks. Insomniacs who build their lives around the hum between midnight and morning. He pulls utility logs, streetlight repairs, water main calls, the mundane emergencies that put eyes on places when most eyes are shut. One entry stares back. Crew dispatched to replace a failing sodium lamp near mile 41 the week before she vanished. Crew scheduled to return the week after for a ballast check, a name on the worksheet, same county contractor, same defunct roster, same alphabet that connects to the suspect's jacket patch. It's not him, it's another guy, a lark of coincidence or pattern. He circles the name and writes light tech. If the lamp flickered, someone noticed the road in the dark. If someone noticed the road in the dark, someone might remember a shape, a color, a rhythm of taillights that didn't feel right. The light tech lives in a rented row of quiet satellite dish tilted like an ear forever cupped. He opens the door with a caution you can hear. The detective flashes the credentials, says the case, says the year, watches the man's eyes wash with memory. The man speaks slowly, in the dialect of those who don't want to misremember and ruin something fragile. He was on that road many nights. He knows the failing lamp. He remembers a stop the week before. He remembers another the week after. He remembers the night she vanished because he didn't remember it then. He was home, beer, late movie, a phone that didn't ring. But he remembers the way the lamp at 41 kept dimming back to a heartbeat glow, and he says a line about how darkness creates its own witnesses. Reflections on chrome, the brief flash of eyes in a deer, a cooler breeze that rides in after heat leaves a hood. He can't give a plate. He gives a rumor of a car, a squared trunk, a roof that ran straight as a rule. The detective writes it down and pretends the pencil isn't shaking. He returns to the second car in the glass, that stubborn geometry. He overlays the lab's silhouettes with a list of cars common in 2003. Crown Victorias, Caprices, early Camrys, the old box sedans that kept rolling when the world went rounder. He pastes them beside the Citrus Man's driveway and the chip in his passenger glass that doubles reflections. He draws arrows that turn the wall into a choreography again. Somewhere in the middle of the arrows, the suspect's truck looms. Still the sun, most lines revolve around. 2 orbits, 2 shadows, one night that won't simplify. It should be maddening. It is, but misery can be momentum when you aim it. The courthouse shudders with motions and countermotions. The defense lifts tunnel vision like a banner and waves it at every camera. The DA lifts public safety like a shield and holds it between the town and doubt. The judge keeps his face neutral, the judicial version of a lie detector. The mother arrives with a scarf despite the heat. Reporters ask whether she believes this is truly over. She says she believes in her daughter and steps past the microphones without touching them. When she sits, her purse never leaves her lap. Every time the door opens, she looks for someone who isn't coming. The detective sits in the back or stands in the hall, and his reply to every question is the same clipped truth. We're still working leads. He works them at places that hold ghosts. An old diner lot, paved over, chewing gum fossils embedded like tiny moons. He meets the former waitress outside a thrift store where she prices clothes with fluorescent tags. She remembers the suspect tipping in even numbers, remembers he liked to sit with his back to the wall, remembers nothing of that particular night because that night turned into every other night and only calcified later when the posters went up and everyone began retconning their memories into prophecy. But she remembers an older sedan idling under the neon, remembers the way its exhaust hiccuped, a stutter kick like asthma. She pulls a face like the taste of regret. "We should have known," she says, which is the anthem of every town that learned the melody too late. He pulls audio from the night, a CB archive kept by a hobbyist with a garage full of radios and a heart tuned permanently to static. The man's recordings run on labeled cassettes stacked like bricks. "The desert talks," the hobbyist says, smiling, and the detective believes him. They spool up the tape for September, voices braided through white noise, truckers swapping mile markers, a bored cop and a bored dispatcher playing a game of Name That Song between calls, a man on a handheld whispering about a car on the shoulder with its lights off. The time code hovers near the disappearance. The whisperer mentions citrus in the air like someone spilled cleaner. He mentions a second vehicle, nose out in the turnout, pointed toward escape. The detective hits pause, then rewind, then play, then feels the grain of validation under his palm. A voice once watched, a voice once said so. The name is not recorded. The voice says copy, then evaporates into static that sounds like someone folding foil. He traces the CB signal to a likely route, calls a list of truckers whose logs put them within an hour of the station that night. Most calls end in maybes and shrugs. One ends in a cough, then a story. A driver had pulled into a turnout to check a strap on a load. He saw a sedan and a truck and a small car between them. The driver didn't get out because the scene felt like a quarrel that wanted privacy. He rolled on. He logged the stop only because the strap genuinely needed tightening and there was a way station ahead that day shift liked to man by surprise. He is retired now. His notes live in a Rubbermaid bin. He finds the bin. He sends a photo of the page. The detective pours coffee and stares at handwriting that trembles only in the way old hands tremble. 3 vehicles. Confirmed not by forensics or enhanced pixels, but by a man with a wrench and a sense for danger. 3 vehicles changes the physics. It means the suspect could be exactly who the file says he is, and the citrus man is not a ghost, but a satellite, and there's a third driver whose orbit brushed close and then fled. It means a question the defense has practiced. If not him, then who? Just morphed into a question the town can feel under its feet. Even if it's him, who else breathed that air? The detective writes a new card. Triangle. He pins it next to who else watched and frowns as if he'd just hung a mirror across from another mirror and watched infinity wrinkle. He walks the turnout again, this time at dusk, this time with an engineer who reads roadways like music. The engineer talks about sight lines and how the bend at 42 gives a driver 3 seconds less reaction time than it should, and how the placement of the sign forces you to commit to the shoulder before you're ready. He sketches in the dust with a stick. Here a sedan idles, here a truck blocks, here a small car is funneled. He doesn't say trap. He doesn't have to. The shape in the dust says it. The wind tries to erase the drawing. The detective takes a photo before the desert gets its way. If it was a trap, someone planned. If someone planned, someone talked, even if only once in a slant rhyme. He revisits a pawn shop that sniffs of metal and old plans. In a glass case, a camcorder, a 2003 model, sits with a tag like an epitaph. The owner says it came in years ago with a box of tapes no one wanted. He kept it because he's sentimental about obsolete things. The detective asks to see the tapes. Most are vacations. The Grand Canyon, a birthday, a car meet in a parking lot where men lean into hoods and brag like friendly criminals. One tape opens to the gas station's neon and a pan across the pumps and a quick zoom that becomes accidental surveillance. September. Date stamp blinks like a heartbeat. In the background of someone else's memory, a boxy sedan idles behind a Honda and a truck rolls slow. He watches it 3 times. He tells the owner he'll need to borrow that. He promises a receipt written in gratitude in ink. He goes back to the citrus man armed with all the small truths that add up like a shadow clock. The man opens the door slower this time, as if the hinges have learned caution. The detective lays down the stills. The CB transcript, the pawn shop frame, the draw in dust. He doesn't say trap. He doesn't have to. He asks about the calendar circle, the 12 and the 13. The man says it was a harvest. He helped a cousin shake lemons into tarps and stunk like citrus for days. He offers a detail he thinks will save him, that he remembers breaking a belt on the car not long after, that he bought new hoses, that anyone with an engine that old ends up swapping out guts like a surgeon working on an elderly patient. True things can be camouflage for hidden ones. The detective asks whether he knew the suspect. The man says small town, you know everyone. The detective asks whether he liked him. The man says he tolerates most men. The detective lets silence widen until it seems like the room will have to snap shut around it. The man breathes shallow. He looks at the corner where his memory keeps its tools. He says, I saw her. It is a sentence so soft the room might have invented it. The detective says, where? The man says, at the pump. The detective waits. The man adds, and then at the turnout. The detective doesn't move. The man says, but I left. The detective asks, who stayed? Name it, and it becomes real. He knows this. The man knows this. The man doesn't name. He pushes the syllables back into his throat like he could swallow the decade. He says there was a fourth shape, a motorcycle that passed fast, that maybe the rider saw, that maybe the rider could say the thing he cannot. It's a desperate throw, multiply witnesses until truth dilutes. But the detective writes it down because pride in this job is how cases spoil. Somewhere there is a rider whose headlight cut the night and whose visor recorded a split second of tableau, a truck, a sedan, a small car, a girl who never made it home, a town that will borrow guilt from any stranger to avoid bankrupting its own. He leaves with the concession of seeing and the denial of knowing. Outside, dusk has blown itself out. Night settles, heavy and familiar. He sits in the unmarked and listens to the loops. CB voice, cashier smell, trucker's note, light text caution, pawn shop zoom, until they braid into a chord you can feel through your bones. The DA calls to ask how certain he is. The detective says the only honest number, more than before. The DA hates that number. The DA likes integers. The defense will love the fuzz. The town will oscillate like a ceiling fan on a slow summer night, wobbling but not falling. Back at the board, he pins up the pawn shop still. He draws a circle around the motorcycle possibility and writes, visor. He calls the state patrol and asks for helmet cam policies from the era and gets laughter, then help, then a list of motorcycle clubs that rode that strip in the early 2000s. Men who put GoPros on their helmets before GoPros were gospel, tinkering types who strapped whatever camera would hold. He searches classifieds for old helmet cams sold cheap. He calls a man who collects them like others collect stamps. The man says he'll check. The detective hangs up and lets the room go quiet enough to hear the tape and the player settling, the ghost of the hiss returning as the machine cools. At the end of the day, he stands at pump 3. The new owner flips the switch and everything washes navy and white. He imagines the angles, how the glass could fracture a reflection, how a chip in a passenger window could turn one car into twins, how a motorcycle visor could compress horror into a single smear of light. He imagines the girl, 19, smile like a lockpick, looking up at the price per gallon, looking down at her phone, looking sideways at the man with the jacket patch, looking into the mirror and seeing another car that the official story forgot. He whispers the old headline because saying it out loud keeps it from owning him. Cold case. He adds the present tense because that's the only tense worthy of pursuit. Ongoing. He leaves the station and drives the road at the speed limit, then slower still, as if the asphalt might finally speak if he respects it enough. The saguaro at 42 lifts its arms into a sky that isn't forgiving. The lights along the strip glow steady. The seam the old sergeant believed in gleams when tires pass. He pulls into the turnout and kills the engine and turns off the headlamps and lets the dark fill the cabin like an ocean rushing a hull. The desert, patient as a courthouse docket, begins telling its story again, not with words, not with pictures, but with pressure. Somewhere beyond the windshield, a single cricket ticks like a bomb you cannot defuse. He doesn't need sleep. He needs the pull in the seam. He needs the name on the other end of the citrus. He needs the visor's glass. He needs one of the orbits to speak. A text vibrates the quiet. The hobbyist, the one with the cassettes, sends a photo of a second tape he found misfiled under October. The label, half peeled, shows September underneath like a bruise, a note. There's another voice. The detective stares at the screen until the light hurts, then starts the car, then points the nose out, because old habits save time when time finally breaks. The headline can wait. The town can wait. The word solved will have to stand in the corner and watch while the story keeps writing itself with heat and glass and breath and two shadows that now, at last, feel like they might be ready to merge. The second tape rides the player like a storm cloud settling on a ridge, slow, heavy, inevitable. The basement lights barely hold their ground as the hiss comes up, as the spool turns, as the past starts uncoiling itself across a strip of magnetic memory that outlived its owner's interest and the town's patience. The hobbyist's handwriting scrawled OCT, then torn back to reveal SEP. Even the label is a confession. The detective leans forward, and the room shrinks to the slit of sound between noise and voice. Static gnaws. A radio check clicks, then a breath. Someone close to a mic, someone not used to being heard, someone about to put a fingerprint on a night the file called finished. Southbound, shoulder, 2 vehicles. Correction, 3. The voice says, fast, low, clean as a cut. Girl alone. Doesn't look right. No name, no call sign. Just a witness talking to no one and everyone, transmitting dread into the dark while nobody in particular was listening. He stops the tape and stares at the pause button the way a man looks at a cliff edge he's just stepped away from. He rewinds, plays it again, lets the vowels register as coordinates. There's a cadence to the voice that smells like the road, long hours, dry air, the slight burn that comes from shouting over engine noise too often. He writes down the phrase "doesn't look right" and underlines it because it's the kind of sentence that survives longer than facts. It's also the kind of sentence a jury understands without a diagram. He calls the hobbyist and asks about the antenna, the direction, the night's atmospheric conditions. Yes, he's that man now, measuring the sky for fingerprints. The hobbyist says skip conditions were ordinary, says the antenna was pointed toward the reservation that month, says the recording deck was glitchy, says all of that to mean the voice came from closer, not farther. Close enough to have seen, close enough to have chosen not to stop. He takes the tape to the sound lab and watches a young tech pull the voice apart like thread, spectrogram unrolled like art. Consonants stack, vowels waver, the tech estimates age, region, even dental pattern from the way S and TH hang. The science is part sorcery, but the detective will take sorcery if it comes with caveats. Southwest, the tech says. Middle-aged then, older now. Smoker once, maybe. The detective writes in a corner, "Roadman," then sketches a little helmet beside it without meaning to. The visor rumor hasn't left his blood. Outside, the courthouse creaks under the weight of the word solved while television gear hums like anxious bees. The defense rides the morning shows with phrases you can print on bumper stickers. Rush to judgment, confirmation bias, case of convenience. The DA counters with phrases that sound like sandbags, chain of custody, corroborating evidence, prosecutorial prudence. The mother is a study in stillness, and her stillness is the most violent thing in the room. People move around it like furniture around a load-bearing wall. The detective drives to the pawn shop with the camcorder like he's carrying a heart on ice. He buys the box of tapes outright, receipts and gratitude delivered with the solemnity of a minor sacrament. He takes them to a digitizer who keeps old machines alive the way a priest tends relics. They feed the plastic bricks through the mouth of the converter and watch the dead wake. Parking lot meets, strip mall summers, a family dog learning to back up. Then there it is again, the gas station, the date stamp blinking like a fragile eye, the unsteady zoom that turns a stranger's nostalgia into an affidavit, a sedan, the squared silhouette, the hiccup in the exhaust you can almost hear because the image shakes when the idol drops, a truck gliding into view like a shark fin that doesn't know it's been seen, a small car pinned between. The camera keeps panning. Its owner didn't care about any of this. He was chasing neon, and the crucial frames brief past like a guilt you refuse to sit with. He steps through them, patient as surgery, and prints the smear that feels like a motorcycle's ghost at the screen edge. Visor or artifact, rumor or rider. He circles it anyway because circles sometimes become doors. He hunts clubs and forums where the early evangelists of helmet cams posted their grainy proofs of speed. Time is a graveyard for links. He digs through caches and backups and the digital attic of men who never throw things away. A username surfaces, a writer who used to post Night Lane's 87 videos, half poems to insomnia and asphalt. The email bounces. The handle leads to a swap meet. The swap meet leads to a garage with a smell you know before you breathe it. Rubber, oil, a pride in the way a chain sings when it's tuned right. The writer is 50 now, lean as a rumor, eyes like someone who has watched a lot of Horizon. He says he remembers the case because everybody does. He says he rode that road because everybody did. He says he had a cam, few nights, homebrew rig, duct tape, aspirations. The detective lays the stills down like tarot, the visor smear, the truck, the sedan. The writer doesn't blink. He says he saw something once and kept riding. He says he didn't want to be the man who found a body. He says it with enough shame that the room warms by a degree with the heat of it. He brings the rider downtown without a warrant or a promise, just the old currency. Sit and talk, and maybe the night will stop gnawing your heels. They watch the digitized pawn shop clip. The writer leans in, lips parted, something old and unwelcome climbing his face. I was there, he says, not a confession, but a gate opening on its hinges. He talks with his hands. The hands draw arcs in the air. Truck here, sedan there, small car like a wedge. He says he rolled the throttle to thread past and the scene snapped onto his visor like a bug. He didn't think danger then. He thought domestic, he thought annoyance, he thought, let them fight without me. But a smell hit under his helmet, something that wasn't oil or heat, citrus undercoolant. He remembers because it didn't belong tonight. He remembers because when the news broke days later, he smelled it again every time he zipped his jacket and yanked the visor down. The detective asks about plates. He shakes his head. He says the visor made a world of light and smear and motion. He says he has old tapes in a box somewhere, not organized, not labeled, the way guilt isn't. The detective nods. He'll look. He'll comb. He'll watch hours for seconds because that's what the scene demands. He puts pressure on the citrus man with courtesy, which is a more effective tool than yelling when a man's fear lives behind manners. He asks for a sample of the car's coolant. The man provides it with a shrug like he's already been judged. The lab doesn't promise miracles. It gives him a profile of additives that points to a certain brand popular in early 2000s bargain aisles. He pairs that with the fragrance compounds in an ancient air freshener, the chemistry of memory, citrus oils and solvents, and the ghost molecules that cling to felt years after the tree fades to beige. It's not a fingerprint, it's a theme. He compares it to trace absorbed in the flagstone phone, the one that slept until they called it back into language, and the overlap hums like a low chord. The DA says don't overpromise. The detective says he rarely promises anything loud. He files the report and quiets the part of him that wants to bang on the glass and shout pattern. He walks back to the suspect because orbits cross even when you think you've mapped the heavens. The man's lawyer meets every question with a velvet hammer. The man himself watches the detective with eyes that never acknowledge history as something he might have authored. The detective brings out the new frames, the second tape, the writer's half-confession. The man's mouth goes taut, and the tautness is more honest than anything he says. You're seeing what you want, the lawyer says. The detective says he's seeing what's there, and what's there is the outline of company. Company at the pumps, company at the turnout. The man says he pitied the family then and pities them now. The sentence is polished to a shine over years of rehearsal. The detective leaves with the sense of taking and leaving nothing, taking air, leaving pressure. In the alley behind the courthouse, a reporter corners him with a microphone and a hunger that feels both civic and personal. She wants the second car story because audiences crave the new twist like desert craves rain. He gives her a sentence that will stall the question while honoring the world. We're pursuing additional angles suggested by newly surfaced archival media. It sounds like chewing cardboard, but it keeps him out of the news and inside the work. The town will learn when it has to. The mother will learn before the town. That's the only rule he believes in. He returns to the light tech, brings coffee in cups that sweat, and opens a map on the hood of a truck. They place pennies on spots where flicker and dark would have made the road stranger that month, mile 41, mile 42, an unlit corner near a wash where shadows build their own architecture. The text says he replaced a ballast the morning after the disappearance and found a cigarette butt crushed under the pole where no one should have stood because there's no reason to linger in that particular patch of gravel unless you're hiding from something brighter. He kept it then because he's the type who keeps talismans without calling them that. He produces a baggie. The detective holds a cardboard-thin smile in place while he pockets it for chain of custody. DNA on old paper? Maybe, maybe not. But a brand, a mark, a clue about a mouth that used to taste smoke. He'll take the smallest hinge if it turns. Pressure finds the citrus man in the produce aisle when an old friend avoids his eyes. Pressure finds the suspect at church when the pew behind him sits empty for the first time in months. Pressure finds the writer at dawn when he opens the box and sees the tape he has not looked at since before guilt learned his address. He brings it in, a relic handed with both palms. They play it in a dark room built for light. The visor shows the world as it was for 8 seconds. Pump neon. The tremor of idle. A truck's flank. A girl's hair like a flag in a wind that should have been kinder. He says stop. He says go back. He says slow. The text slows until each frame feels like a heartbeat you can put your finger on. In the corner of one frame, the detective sees a sticker on the sedan's rear glass. A decal from a defunct auto parts store 2 towns over. A store that gave them out like candy to men who bragged about doing their own work. He freezes it, he prints it, he draws a circle and writes 2 words that taste like gear oil and dust. Club member. He goes there, the hollowed-out storefront now a vacuum repair shop where belts have replaced belts. He tracks the old owner to a ranch where machines go when they're tired. The owner brings a box of registration cards, sun-faded, name lines scratched by men who held pens like they held wrenches. The detective flips through 100 anonymous heroes of their own garages until he finds the citrus man's name and, 3 cards later, a name that drops into the room like a tool from a ladder. A friend, a sometimes co-worker, a man whose DMV record shows a sedan that fits the silhouette like a shirt. The man moved east in 2005. The man got a DUI in 2002. The man listed his address as a trailer park 10 miles from the gas station the year of the disappearance. The detective draws a triangle with names at each point and feels the shape settle into the board as if the wall were a magnet and the truth a sliver of metal finally pulled home. He calls the address, finds a forwarding address, calls that, hits a deadline, asks a credit bureau for a scrap of modernity, gets a P.O. box, stations 2 uniforms with patients outside a place where bills and secrets sleep. Days pass. The uniforms learn the rhythm of junk mail. The detective walks the turnout again, the place starting to feel like a chapel he doesn't believe in and visits anyway. He talks to the old sergeant in his head and hears, "The seam is a kindness. It gives you a place to pull." He mentions the kindness out loud, and the wind takes it like gossip. On the 4th morning, a man collects the P.O. box contents. Thin stack, heavier hand. They tailed him without waking him to the tale, and now the unmarked idles half a block back while he drives to a stucco complex that pretends at luxury with a pool that tastes like old sunscreen. The man is older than the file, but younger than the guilt. In his trunk, a milk crate of car things. On his key ring, a bottle opener dressed as a wrench. They knock. They watch the face do the math only the guilty do. How much do they know? How much can I outlast? They say 2003. He says lawyer. They say we'll wait. They do, in the hall, in the heat, until the man opens the door because sometimes silence is the only battering ram you need. Inside, a framed decal from the defunct parts store, a nostalgia piece that now feels like a signature. He says he sold that sedan years ago. He says he never liked the suspect. He says he didn't know the citrus man well. He says everything with the airy tone of a man unafraid of perjury, as if lying to cops is just another form of keeping one's own counsel. The detective lays the visor still down. He lays the auto parts card down. He lays the CB transcript down. He never says trap. He says turnout. He says pump. He says distance. The man's eyes click across the items and won't land. The detective asks if he ever parked nose out. The man says everyone does if they're smart. The detective asks if he's smart. The man finds the smallest smile his face will allow. It looks like a cut. The DA wants clean edges. This is still a sketch. But sketches sometimes get you warrants. They get one for the storage unit the man forgets he mentioned with his glance when the P.O. box junk mail included a red-stamped overdue notice. They cut a lock and enter a smell ancient as sweat. Boxes labeled with dates like someone tried to file a conscience. A tarp lifted to reveal a bumper, not the sedan. Another car, parted out, a hobbyist's mausoleum, but in a shoebox. VHS C-tapes, parties, cars, road. One labeled with the number 87 scrawled in a hurry. They play it on a converter that squeals. There's road, night, a run from town to turnout, a drift into the shoulder, a laugh, a hush, a tilt of camera toward a pump, toward a girl, toward a shape that knows it's being looked at and looks back. In the sound, under noise, 3 words recorded by accident. Spoken by a voice the detective has never heard, but will never be able to forget once he has. Block her in. He freezes the tape where the mouth moves. He doesn't know yet whose mouth. He knows only command when he hears it. He feels the room breathe like it just remembered a song. He prints the frame, circles the jawline, the hat brim, the angle of a hand gesturing to another hand. He does not cheer. He does not curse. He calls the DA and says a sentence that lands with the weight of a shifted charge. We have orchestration. The DA closes his eyes like a saint in a painting. He asks, "Does it touch our guy?" The detective says, "It brushes him." The DA asks, "Does it name him?" The detective says, "Not yet." The DA says, "Find the bridge." The detective looks at the wall, at triangles and orbits and index cards like tiny banners hung over a ruined city, and whispers the order that has pulled men through worse. One more step. He goes to the mother because keeping this from her would be like stealing slack from a rope. He tells her careful, honest, specific, no promises except that he will not confuse headlines with answers. She holds the photo on the fridge a little tighter and says a thing he's never heard her say. If there were more than one, then no one gets to be the lone villain in our stories anymore. He nods. He thinks of the town and how it will hate that, how it likes its monster solitary, its catharsis singular. He thinks of the word solved and how it will need to be edited with a pencil first, then a pen. Night again. pump 3 humming under lighting that refuses to flicker anymore. The detective stands where the camera once shook and the visor once split the world into smear and streak. He says the CB phrase under his breath, doesn't look right, and decides it isn't a commentary, it is a directive. Trust the wrongness. He follows it to the turnout. The saguaro stands with its arms like exclamation marks. He kills his lights and waits for the dark to show him where to pull next. Out there in the black, a second tape still spins, a writer's box still opens, a storage unit still exhales. Out there, a voice that said, "Block her in," is about to learn what happens when a town stops borrowing fear and starts spending it like a currency meant to buy only one thing, the truth the desert has owed them for 22 years. Morning folds over the desert like a fresh sheet, but the creases of the night remain stubborn, visible if you know where to look. The 3 words, "block her in," keep replaying, a loop that turns the room into a machine for converting sound into consequence. Orchestration, not impulse, not accident, not a single bad man and a single bad minute. A plan with edges. The DA wants a bridge, something that walks those words across to the suspect's doorstep and plants them there without slipping. The detective begins with the simplest architecture, time. He takes the receipt clock, the time card break, the pawn shop clip's date stamp, the writer's visor frames, the CB voice's minute hand, and lays them on a timeline like rails. He plugs in the light text ballast ticket, the deputy's roadside assist note, the diner's closing hour, the wait station's strap log. The lines converge into a bottleneck that runs between 11:18 and 11:31 p.m. 13 minutes wide, small enough to hold a plan, large enough to give it room to breathe. He writes in thick marker, "window." He doesn't need to explain it, the room already knows. Next, he pulls on the storage unit thread because people who keep tapes keep other things. Souvenirs they don't call that, tools they never needed twice, paperwork they believe no one would ever ask about. The second row of boxes offers up calendars, the paper kind, months X'd one day at a time as if someone was counting down to a different life and never found it. September 2003. Tiny symbols in the margins, small car doodles, arrows toward the 12th and 13th. A cartoon lemon beside the 11th that feels like an in-joke between men who thought jokes were a currency. He bags the pages, the ink already fading, the meanings newly loud. A plastic envelope yields punch cards from the defunct contractor, the company that shared a roster with the suspect's jacket patch, plus a map with pencil grooves where a hand pressed too hard. 2 routes circled, one ends at the gas station, the other ends at the turnout. Across both, a line drawn like a zipper, meet or pinch. The handwriting is not the suspect's. The suspect writes in upright squares. This hand leans, cramped, careful, the script of a man who learned penmanship in a school where discipline lived in wrists. He scans it, runs it against samples from the citrus man, from the writer, from the storage unit renter. The program doesn't bless him with certainty. It gives him percentages. He doesn't worship percentages. He treats them like weather. Carry a jacket, plan a route, go anyway. He asks the DA for a quiet warrant on the suspect's financials from that month, not a fishing expedition, just a hook for something shiny. The records bring up a cash withdrawal the afternoon of the 12th, $200, a sum big enough to fuel a night and small enough to vanish without leaving a receipt. He pairs it with a purchase at a hardware store the week before. 2 LED work lights, a clamp, a roll of duct tape. Alone, they're a handyman's shopping list. In context, they're flood and focus and bind. The lawyer will say circumstantial. He will be right. The detective writes on the board anyway. Light, move, hold. He returns to the citrus man, this time with a softer hammer. He doesn't accuse. He lays the calendar page on the table like a modest meal. He asks about the lemon doodle. The man stares as if the page has spoken his first name in a stranger's voice. He says it was a joke about harvest. He says he had a sense of humor then. The detective nods. He asks about the words meet and pinch, scribbled in pencil beside the roads. The man says he doesn't know, but his body knows. His shoulders withdraw 2 degrees as if from a hand that isn't there. The detective lets the silence tear up until it becomes a ceiling. The man says, shaking, that he doesn't want to die in this town as the man who kept quiet. The detective doesn't move. The man asks if the law can tell the difference between an observer and a piece of the machine. The detective says yes, because sometimes the truth needs a promise to walk towards. The man says there was a phone call at 10:57. The man says a voice said we're on, same as the drill. The man says he drove because he always drove when someone else planned. He says the suspect was the voice or next to the voice or the voice's shadow. He says he can't swear which because memory is a cruel mirror. He says he saw the girl, he saw the truck, he saw the plan's shape, and then fear put its hand on his back and pushed him through the moment without letting him grab a corner. The DA hears the words cooperation and charges the air with conditions. Immunity is a church no one walks into lightly. They draft a proffer with clauses like tripwires. The citrus man wants an off-ramp labeled witness, not architect. The DA inks a narrow path. The detective sits in it like a man perched on a rope over a canyon. He goes hunting for the missing bridge and places court's respect. Phone records, even fossilized. It was the era before cloud. Carriers were vaults and shredders. He finds a retired compliance officer who kept microfiche because he didn't trust deletion. They scroll through tiny panes like stained glass for accountants. He gets a list of numbers around the gas station's tower that blinked alive between 10:40 and 11:40 p.m. The suspect's listed cell shows nothing. He was careful. But the disposable line found in his drawer, the one he said he used for old notes, shows a brief handshake with a second disposable, a number in service for 1 month only, the month she vanished. He maps the handshake. One ping near the contractor yard, one ping near the gas station, a third that dies near the turnout like a last exhale. He prints the map even though the lawyer will call it guesswork and the judge will call it admissible only after a speech. He pins it next to the words, "block her in," and the room tightens as if the board itself is bracing. More pressure. He puts the rider in front of the DA with counsel present and a camera pointed like a painless gun. The rider tells the visor story with shame and specifics. He points to the sticker on the sedan's rear glass in the frame and names the defunct parts store, unprompted. He says he knew the citrus man's car because every man who keeps an old engine running knows every other man who does the same. Tribes recognize tribe by exhaust note. He says he heard a voice say "block her in," muffled by the helmet, printed anyway on a place in his head that hasn't faded like the tapes. He signs the statement. He offers the box. He says he knows what he is in this story. He wants to be something else. The suspect's lawyer hears a rumor of cooperation and schedules a press conference to call it betrayal by cowards. The suspect listens with a face that prefers nothingness to error. The town spits the word conspiracy in tones that mean either finally or please no. The mural of the girl's eyes gets candles again, and the wax makes halos on the sidewalk. The mother watches this all with a gaze that would blister paint. She doesn't headline her emotions. She pinches her lips until color returns to them like rain to hard ground. She calls the detective by his first name when she asks him to do the thing he is already doing. Don't stop now. The bridge arrives the way bridges often do, half accident, half gravity. A mechanic 2 towns over calls the tip line not because he recognized a face on TV, but because a customer brought in a truck years ago with a cracked taillight that looked almost, nearly, exactly like a chip seen in a case with a reward flyer he kept above his bench. The reward didn't move him. The drive did. He remembers replacing the lens. He remembers the man insisting on OEM parts like a recovering sinner. He remembers the date because he wrote the invoice on a calendar double booked with his kid's play. September 14th, he has the invoice still, faded thermal paper asleep in a file. The name on it, a friend of the suspect, someone the roster knows, and the storage unit index cards nodded toward in shorthand. A man who once shared a job site and a poker night and a taste for parking nose out. They bring him in, hard questions wrapped in soft tone. He says he broke a light on a deer. He says the desert jumps at you. Sometimes you hit back. He says he was nowhere near the station. He says anyone can be near any station when gas is cheap. They show him the invoice. They show him the visor still. They show him the 3 words from the tape. They do not say trap. He breaks first at the timelines because men like him hate calendars, the way they pin your lies to a wall. He says he wasn't the voice. He says he only drove. He says the suspect was the one who always stood where the action happened, the man who handed out rolls like hardware and called it teamwork. He says he didn't touch her. He says he didn't speak to her. He says he didn't stay. He says what cowards say when courage shows up 10 years late. The DA calls it corroboration. The defense calls it desperation. The judge calls it admissible if Cross survives. The detective calls it the first plank of the bridge. He goes looking for the rest in the contractor yard where the locker gave up its key. He walks the lot with a magnet rake and a willingness to look foolish. He collects screws, washers, a world of ordinary metal. In the shade behind a shed, the magnet clicks to a fragment of plastic. He kneels. A taillight shard, aged, the exact tint of the model the mechanic replaced. He bags it. He knows a lab that can tell you how plastic learned to break. Impact vector, force. He is building a cathedral from crumbs, and if that sounds too ornate, understand. The town has been living in a lean-to. Anything with a roof looks like a church. The citrus man returns to the table. He adds a detail no one asked for. The suspect liked to test run plans as jokes. "Let's run the drill," he'd say, grinning, a phrase that turned play into practice. The calendar with meat and pinch fits. The map with routes fits. The disposable pings fit. The 3 vehicles fit. The voice fits everywhere except the suspect's mouth. No tape puts the syllables there. The detective stares at the wall and feels the seam give under his fingertips. He needs a mouth. He needs a place where the suspect forgot to be careful. He asks for every scrap of surveillance from the parking lot of the contractor yard from that week. Tape stored wrong, mislabeled, doomed. The custodian brings a crate. Dust coughs. They feed one tape to a dying VCR, and the screen fogs up with lines that eventually learn to sit still. A day before the disappearance, the suspect stands in the lot, flanked by two men, Citrus and Taillight, and gestures toward a truck, toward a map spread on the hood, toward a shape traced with two fingers like a small car. His mouth moves. The tape has no sound. The detective watches hands. The hands say everything the lost audio can't. Block, box, corner. The suspect laughs after he draws the wedge. The laugh looks like ownership. The detective prints the frame and knows it isn't enough. It's a ghost that needs a voice. He gets the voice from a voicemail because pride ensures it exists somewhere. The suspect called a coworker that same day. Left a message about pinching a problem in the lot, like we drilled it. The coworker saved it not because it mattered, but because he never deletes anything. His inbox is a museum of the unimportant. The timestamp lands in the window. The phrase lands like a boot. They seize the phone with consent, image the data, extract the relic. The DA listens twice, then a third time, then nods in a way a man nods when bridges finally meet in the middle. They amend the charge sheet. They add words like conspiracy that change the temperature of the room. The defense stomps. The judge permits. The town hears the shift run through itself like electricity, and the mural gets new candles. Not because anyone thinks fire solves anything, but because flames acknowledge that darkness is real and needs answering in kind. Night again, and the detective stands at the turnout with his eyes closed, letting the soundscape tell him if they've tuned to the right frequency. Crickets. A car in the distance. Air moving like an animal, deciding whether to settle. He opens his eyes. The saguaro's arms are steady. The seam tugs once more, just to be sure he's paying attention. He is. The bridge they've laid creaks with weight, but holds. The words block her in have a body now, a geometry, a history. He breathes in the old smell, coolant, dust, citrus, and breathes out a sentence he can finally own without flinching. Solved is not a finish line, it's a door. And this one, at last, is starting to open on its hinges. The door starts to open, and the sound it makes is the sound of a tape being pulled from a shell, sticky, reluctant, full of old grit. The voicemail sits on the DA's desk like a stone. Pinching a problem in the lot, like we drilled it. A sentence that believes no one will ever need it for anything except ego. They pair it with the map on hood footage, the wedge traced by fingers, the laugh that looked like ownership. They pair it with pings and taillight shards and calendars where lemons smile in the margins. The bridge groans, holds. The suspect's lawyer stands at a podium and talks about context, about how zeal turns ordinary into ominous, about how men say dumb things in parking lots. The town listens, nods, then doesn't. The mural stares unblinking from the cinder block wall. The mother drinks lukewarm coffee and keeps the cup in her hands as if warmth is a testimony that doesn't require cross. The detective has learned to watch the edges of things. Headlines are loud, edges whisper. An edge whispers inside a file from the Environmental Agency, drainage work scheduled near mile 42 in late 2004. A backhoe that hit something that wasn't rock and logged it as miscellaneous debris, then got reassigned after a storm. No one followed up because storms rearrange priorities. The detective reads the entry twice, feels the seam tug, calls the foreman who signed the form. The foreman is retired now, keeps lures and old film canisters, calls everyone kid, remembers the backhoe operator, remembers he swore and said, "This ground's got memory." They go out there with flags and permission in a sense that the desert might finally cough. The turnout looks the same and not. Night is honest camouflage, daylight is vanity lighting. Every flaw shows. They grid the ground with thin cords, squares like a paper cut into a map. A cadaver dog works slow circles that turn into punctuation. Pause here, deeper breath there. The dog sits once at the edge of a wash. The handler looks up. The detective looks up. They bring in the GPR, the machine that sees through dirt the way a doubter sees through sermons. Wavy lines on a screen. Discontinuities. The operator taps a spot with his boot. Something unnatural, he says, a phrase that covers both crime and geology. The detective kneels, sifts handfuls of sand like he's trying to remember how gravity works. They scrape with trowels until metal whispers against metal, a bolt. Then inches away, a fragment of headlight glass that remembers the shape of a 2000s compact. The shovel finds a crease of painted steel, sun-bleached from years of burial, the color you'd get if Starlight had a brand. Blue or gray, pretending to be blue. He knows the Honda's VIN, like he knows the case number, like he knows her birthday, even though he never met her alive, only later, through documents and desperation. They widen the hole, patient, because impatient breaks what's left. The backhoe waits, engine ticking, until the operator is allowed to take 2 bites of earth with a delicacy that contradicts the size of his machine. A wheel emerges like the moon coming up the edge of a desert plateau, then a door edge, then a roofline collapsed like a held breath finally let go. The detective touches metal and feels heat from a sun that hasn't touched this panel in 2 decades, heat transferred through sand like a message that took the long way around. They call everyone you call when the thing you've been looking for gives itself up. The area becomes a ring of vests, clipboards, cameras that document, not broadcast. The mother is offered a chair and refuses it. She stands at the perimeter with hands wrapped around her elbows as if new wind has moved in under her skin. The detective steps back, lets forensics own the space. They work the car like a church, with ritual and respect. Every bag is labeled as if careful handwriting could lift weight. They find a bracelet tangled in a seam, a cheap one. Rainbow beads faded to a memory of color. They find hair braided into the fabric of a headrest, hair the lab will treat like a relic, and the mother will register as a prayer answered sideways. They find a phone charger that belongs to an era that thought plugs were forever. They find dirt. Dirt that went everywhere, dirt that infiltrated, dirt that coated and softened and told no lies except the one about time being able to erase anything. The Honda becomes a phantom in the tow lot, strapped on a flatbed, wrapped in blue tarp, like dignity. The detective walks around it as if orbit creates ownership. He notes the crumple pattern, sees how the front end hit something not moving or was forced against something, slow at first, then hard. A push, not a crash. He sees on the rocker panel a smear he will dream about later, the ghost of a tire tread where a bigger vehicle pressed, boxed, turned an exit into a wall. He says nothing out loud because description can become accusation, and he's already learned what happens when you narrate too soon. The DA arrives, eyes narrowing at the hinge between relief and outrage. "This stabilizes us," he says, which is not a sentence for television, which is how you know it matters. Stabilizes the timeline, stabilizes the geometry, stabilizes the claim that what happened wasn't random. The defense releases a statement about the tragedy of closure masquerading as proof. The suspect sits in county and waits, the patience of a man who built his life around waiting for other people to blink. They lift the car's undercarriage and find, lodged in the seam where the unibody folds, a sliver of red plastic with black paint transferred to it. The lab shields its hope with protocol, but the detective lets his own hope add 2 degrees to the room. Tail light, black enamel, model-specific texture. They compare it to the shard from behind the contractor shed. They nest like puzzle pieces cut by the same blade. The report doesn't sing. Reports never do. It just says consistent with, and the DA reads consistent with the way a man reads his own name on a list that matters. They take the discovery to the judge, who is not impressed by poetry and does not reward breathlessness. They ask to expand the search to the suspect's old properties and the triangle's third point, the man with the P.O. box, the storage unit, the bumper mausoleum. The warrants go through with language that tastes like dry bread. The detective doesn't care how it tastes, he cares that it feeds. They roll on the third man's apartment, not a raid, a polite wave of inevitability. Inside, shelves of binders labeled as if labeled things can't hurt you, receipts, oil changes, a set of handwritten checklists titled drill, like a boys' club masquerading as a crew, like a rehearsal pretending it isn't for anything. One list has 3 columns, truck, sedan, small, tasks broken into verbs that make you want to wash your hands after reading, approach, box, pinch, calm, move. Under calm, a note, music, talk normal, tell her you'll call a tow. The detective reads that line 4 times and swallows hard because of its intimacy, its casual evil, its assumption that kindness is a tool you can use to pry open someone else's trust. Under move, a map with the turnout circled and a little cartoon saguaro beside it, as if the desert was an accomplice with a sense of humor. They find a cooler in the man's closet with a sticker from the same defunct auto parts store. Inside, nothing. On the lid, a smear of adhesive that held a label long gone. On the underside, a serial number that ties back to a batch of cheap LED floods sold during a promotion the week before the 12th. The hardware store prints the old flyer like summoning a ghost. Nightwork sale, in block letters, a smiling clip art electrician no one can look at without flinching now. The citrus man, doing his penance in real time, agrees to a walkthrough at the yard with cameras rolling for evidentiary purposes only. He stands by the locker where the key slept. He stands by the whiteboard where someone once sketched routes with a dry erase marker that bled into the pores of the plastic and never truly left. He points to the corner where the suspect smiled the day before and said, "Let's run the drill." He points to the spot where a floodlight used to be kept. He points to the gravel where he once stood with a mouth full of excuses and a heart full of static. He doesn't cry. He blinks hard enough to make the room look like it's underwater, which is its own kind of honesty. The rider sits for round 2. He watches the visor clip again, the smear of light, the shape of the wedge, the way the night felt scripted. He adds a sentence he'd pushed out of his memory because it sounded too movie. When he passed, someone's voice tried to sound casual and landed on cheerful and said, "We got it." He thought at the time it was just men kidding themselves. He thinks now it was a victory declaration whispered into a dark that wasn't listening. He signs the addendum. He doesn't get to forgive himself yet. He might not, ever. But the seam loosens a stitch when he walks out. The town's discourse tilts. People who once said one man, one monster begin to say it out loud in grocery aisles. There were more. People who once clung to solved as a period learn the grammar of a semicolon. Another clause coming, equal weight, tethered, none of it neat. The church bulletin adds a line about patience. The school counselor prints a flyer about complicated grief. The mural's candles burn in the wind, and the wax records the gusts and frank lines that look like seismograph printouts. The defense recalibrates in public. If there were more, perhaps our man is less. The detective answers that in private with what he has. More does not subtract, it multiplies. He stacks evidence into interplay, not isolation. The voicemail says drill and pinch. The map shows wedge. The timeline holds them in a window no one can widen without breaking physics. The Honda emerges where the plan's exit wanted it. The plastic shard ties one man's lies to another's citations. The CB voice and the rider's visor give shape to the scene that never wanted an audience. The citrus man draws a thin line between observation and action and admits he stepped on both sides. The judge sets a date for a hearing that will determine what the jury hears as architecture and what gets left as rumor. The detective rehearses testimony in a room with no windows and a chair that squeaks at the wrong moments. He keeps his sentences short because he learned to tell facts like headlines. He saves his adjectives for the part where adjectives matter: the smell, coolant, dust, citrus, so the jurors can feel the air from 22 years ago on their tongues. Late, in the office that feels borrowed from time, he takes out the bracelet from its bag. He doesn't touch it, he looks. Rainbow beads, the thread stretched then slack. He thinks about 19, about smiles that pick locks, about the habit of taking the long way home, about radios that throw out songs like breadcrumbs and the world that pretends to follow them. He thinks about the suspect's laugh, about the word drill, about the arrogance of men who believe choreography can erase conscience. He thinks about the desert's stubborn hospitality, how it hides and returns, how it keeps secrets like a bank and pays out interest in shards and tire ghosts. He writes on an index card 3 more words and pins them below: who else watched in triangle. We stayed late. It is not evidence. It is a vow. They go back to the turnout at night before the hearing because sometimes places talk louder when lawyers are asleep. The saguaro is a black geometry against a deeper black. The stars do not care, but they are here. He stands where the wedge would have pressed and listens for the phrase that will make the testimony more than a recitation. It arrives, as it often does, from the past, in a voice he can't place. Doesn't look right. He will say that on the stand, not as speculation, but as a witness of a witness, a relay of the thing the road told someone else who told a tape that told him. He will say, block her in, with the steadiness of a man who has held that sentence long enough that it no longer shakes in his palm. Back at the yard, a small epilogue, a box of old PPE, gloves, masks, goggles, gives up a pair of safety glasses with a hair trapped in the hinge, not the suspect's, not the citrus man's, not the third man's, a fourth, or transfer, or the cruel joke of contamination. The lab will tell him only what the molecule can tell. A mitochondrial line that says female, a profile that says not the victim. He files it under humility. Even solved surrenders room for ghosts. The hearing day cracks open hot. Reporters sweat in their suits and bright shirts, their makeup yielding to weather and worry. The suspect is ushered in with the bored efficiency of men who do this every day. The mother sits in her seat, the scarf again despite heat, ritual shoulder armor against fluorescent light. The detective waits in the hall until called, feeling time stack, feeling the seam under his fingers like the spine of a book you've finally read to the right page. On the stand, he walks the room through the night without adjectives until he needs them. He arranges the pumps, the visor, the CB whisper, the wedge, the voicemail, the map on hood, the grid, the Honda, the shard's twin, the taillight invoice, the storage unit lists. He says drill once and lets it hang. He says pinch once and makes a small wedge with his hands because geometry is a language too. He says doesn't look right and watches 12 faces admit that sometimes your body knows before your mind dares. The defense peels at edges, asks about probability, about pixel lies, about the arrogance of inference. He answers with the patience of a man who has put flags in dirt and held bracelets without touching them and learned the smell of a crime scene 2 decades late. He answers with, I don't know where I don't know, and I am certain where certainty is warranted. He leaves the adjectives back on the turnout, a tithe to the desert. When he steps down, the room exhales. The judge rules on the bridge. Most of it stands. The voicemail crosses, the map crosses, the shard crosses. The visor enters as context with a limiting instruction that the defense will pretend is salvation. The CB voice is allowed to live as a contemporaneous observation. Lawyers nod because Latin would have said it prettier, but English will do. The writer's shame will sit under oath and try to become something else. Outside, the sun doesn't blink. The mural's eyes don't either. The town rearranges itself around a new fact. Solved can hold more than one name. The detective drives to mile 42 one more time because endings are lies told by calendars. He parks nose in because habits are a choice. He looks at the space where the Honda slept and at the saguaros that kept the watch no one assigned them. He whispers into the air, not to be heard, but to not keep it inside. We are not done. He does not mean the case. Paperwork will take years. Testimony will take months. Sentences will be argued like theology. He means the deeper thing, the seam that taught him that closure is a headline, and truth is a road, and you walk both until the desert gives you back what it took. He turns the key. The engine wakes. The heat lifts. The door keeps opening. And the night ahead, for once, looks like a place where a car can pass without being pressed into a story. The hearing leaves behind a wake. Paper, breath, the soft thud of doors returning to jams, and the town drifts in it like boats that have cut their engines. The bridge stands, the words cross. The suspect is walked back in chains that don't rattle, as if even the metal knows to keep the volume down. The detective folds the transcript into his folder and feels the seam under his thumb like a pulse he can monitor without a stethoscope. Outside, microphones graze the air for friction. He gives them the sentence that neither feeds nor starves. We proceed. It's a headline that refuses pyrotechnics, and that refusal is its own kind of urge. Proceeding looks like hours in rooms that smell faintly of dry erase and copier toner. It looks like depositions where voices learn not to rise. It looks like the citrus man signing his name until the ink thins, then signing again with a fresh pen and a shoulder that trembles afterward as if ink has weight. It looks like the third man, the taillight invoice man, practicing, not remembering, until the lines he rehearses start to forget him back. It looks like the writer sitting in a chair meant for waiting and not leaving until someone asks him a question he can answer without apology. It looks like the mother washing a cup and drying it and placing it back on the shelf she never uses for guests anymore. A thread the detective left in a folder comes tugging. The environmental foreman's line, "This ground's got memory," turns literal. Road crews widening the shoulder 2 counties south hit a shallow cache of trash that isn't trash. A cooler lid with the same batch number as the one in the closet. A roll of duct tape hardened into a fossil curl. A box of LED floods scorched at one corner like someone tried to convince evidence to forget itself with a match. None of it bleeds. None of it screams. All of it hums the same low chord. Procurement. Planning. Practice. The DA calls it pattern. The defense calls it coincidence with receipts. The judge will decide the label. The desert has already decided the sequence. He returns to the safety glasses hair because humility or not molecules can be wayfinders. The lab separates the line from noise, runs it against missing persons, against the victim's circle, against the town's choir of everyday DNA. A hit doesn't come, a near hit does. A cousin of a receptionist who worked at the contractor office in 2003, a woman who left town the following year for a life that promised fewer hot summers and fewer hot tempers. The detective finds her in photos filed by chance. Holiday party, sheet cake, a banner that reads, "Safety is no accident," with letters curling at the corners. She's in the background, shoulders angled away, eyes on a man telling a joke. Not the suspect. The third man. He tracks her to a P.O. box in a different desert, another town that calls itself Outskirts even though the outskirts grew past it. He writes a letter that says only this: "You were near men who rehearsed harm. If you need a hand leaving the past alone, I won't offer it. Won't. If you need a hand telling it, call." He includes a number that goes to him and no one else. The call comes at night, the hour of clarities and bad decisions. She says she remembers the phrase drill because they wrote it on a whiteboard and boxed it in like a prize. She says she remembers the suspect practicing lines with the taillight man, like boys pretending at SWAT with the wrong kind of heart. She says she remembers the citrus smell, not because of harvest, but because the suspect kept a slice in a baggie to rub on his hands after he worked. It masked whatever work asked you to wash twice. She says she threw away a list once with the word calm underlined and felt guilty like she had stolen something and relieved like she had annihilated something. She says she is willing to say these things under oath if someone will stand on the other side of the door when she leaves the room. The detective says he will. He means it. Jail calls are a meadow where arrogance grazes. Recorded, warned, ignored. The suspect speaks in code that isn't clever. He talks about practice makes. He talks about pinch points. He talks about his old drills with men whose names he doesn't say because he believes omission is a solvent. He asks someone to check the yard for leftover junk, then laughs at a joke only he finds funny. The analyst spools the calls and tags the moments where code steps on its own shoelaces. The DA listens to a dozen hours and hears the 30 seconds he needed. They're going to try to tie my mouth to the plan, the suspect says, but all they've got is rehearsal. They'll never find the part where I told anyone to move. The DA, who has the voicemail as a hobby horse and the map on hood as a saddle, smiles a smile so thin it could cut cloth. The CB voice hangs like a lantern you don't know where to set. The hobbyist brings in another tape, the October that was September pair, and the tech works the syllables like a tuner twisting pins. A retired patrolman hears the voice and says a name, not with certainty, but with a cop's gambler hunch. That name points to a trucker turned mechanic, turned grandfather, turned hospice patient with a window view of a parking lot where no one parks nose out, because hospice is one of the few places where hurry finally loses. The detective visits. The man's lungs sound like paper bags. He introduces himself, and the man says the year before the detective does. He says he didn't stop because he didn't want to be the first one to see what he was sure someone else would see after him. He says he lives with that decision like a coin under his tongue he can't spit out. He says doesn't look right was the only clean thought he had. He says he heard, "We got it," too. He watches the ceiling as he speaks. The way people do when telling the truth makes eye contact too intense. The DA calls the man's statement what the law lets it be, a dying declaration if the worst arrives before trial. The nurse in the hall stops pretending not to listen and pretends not to wipe her cheek after. The third man begins to wobble under gravity. He's not a confessor by nature. He's a bargain maker. The DA lets the idea of tears hang in the air. Architecture, execution, ancillary. The third man wants ancillary like a life raft. He offers a thumb drive he says he kept as insurance because men like him rarely believe in God but always believe in backups. On it, stills of a whiteboard from September 2003 taken with an early digital camera so proud of its own pixels, it stamped the date in the corner. The board shows the words meet, pinch, calm, move, each with bullet points that read like crimes written in office speak. The suspect's hand draws a diagram while someone else holds the marker. In the reflection of the dry erase sheen, you can see his jacket patch backwards. Conspiracy has a new exhibit, and it's not a tape from the desert's throat. It's a picture from a room with a coffee ring on the table and a plant dying in the corner. The defense tries to reframe. You're criminalizing planning, they say. You're narrating maps. They file a motion to suppress the voicemail on a theory that bites its own tail. The judge denies with a sentence that reads like a shrug dressed in robes. The suspect sits straighter, like posture can win. He passes a note to his lawyer that a camera catches. 9 words. The detective gets the zoomed still later. The note says, "We need to separate lemons from the wedge." He doesn't know if the metaphor is gallows humor or simple arrogance. He pins the printout on the board anyway because the board eats everything, because sometimes jokes are blueprints with a grin. The mother visits the tow lot under supervision. She asks to stand by the car. The tarp is peeled like a curtain. She places her palm on the roof and then pulls it back, as if heat has traveled through years to warn her. She nods once, to herself, not to the detective or the DA or the camera that records only for the file. She says, "I thought the world was a place. It is, but it's also a plan." The sentence lodges. The detective will carry it into cross-examination like a talisman he never shows. He tracks the safety glasses back one more generation. The model was issued in bulk to contractors who attended a specific training the week before the 12th, a night exercise about nighttime hazards on rural shoulders. The sign-in sheet lives in a box no one has opened in 20 years. They open it. The sheet lists the suspect, the third man, the citrus man, and one more, an apprentice who left after the training and never returned because he quit construction for a job in a grocery freezer and then left town for good. The apprentice's name matches a receipt for a lemon-scented cleaner purchased the afternoon of the 12th. The detective calls a number that's not a number anymore. He calls another that belongs to a sister who says he died in 2016 of a thing that takes breath away. She says he left a box labeled work stuff in her attic, and receipts were the only things that seemed organized. Inside the box, a notebook with a single line on a page for September. Pinch practice is not pretend. The detective sits on the floor of a stranger's foyer and lets the sentence settle on his shoulders like someone else's coat that still fits somehow. The DA holds a meeting where hallways do their echo trick and small words become bigger. Conspiracy becomes enterprise. Enterprise becomes pattern. Pattern becomes narrative. Narrative becomes the straightest path from block her in to a verdict with weight. They diagram counts, names, roles like a playbill that nobody buys popcorn for. The citrus man's proffer tightens. The third man's thumb drive becomes a dictionary for the whiteboard's clipped vocabulary. The writer's visor clip earns a disclaimer's paragraph and then its small, necessary place. The dying declaration gets a sticky note with the words, if admitted. The detective underlines it twice and refuses to negotiate with hope until hope earns it. The town keeps living because it must. Kids learn to drive on roads where headlights now feel like opinions. The gas station playlist skews older, as if the owner picked songs that understand memory as a muscle. Someone repaints the mural's background a shade lighter so the eyes seem closer. The school counselor adds a second flyer. Safety meetings aren't always safe. It's blunt, it's true. The printer jams. She fixes it with the patience of someone who knows machines jam on the days you really need them. The suspect's lawyer whispers plea as if the syllable might sprout legs and walk into a different courtroom. The DA shakes his head. Architecture doesn't plead to paint. The judge schedules a pre-trial where jurors will be sworn not yet to decide and asked only to hold space for decision. The detective rehearses again. Present tense, past tense, future tense contained. He exhales citrus in his imagination and decides he will never buy that scent for his house. Not out of superstition, out of respect. The hospice man takes a turn and then stabilizes. He asks for the detective and says he has one more thing. He saw a decal not just on the sedan but on the truck too, small, on the rear glass, half peeled. The detective brings photos. He points. The hospice man taps the one with the defunct parts store's logo and nods. The suspect in 2003 liked to advertise his tribe. The DA hums the pleased hum of a man who can now say same source obsession in front of a jury without having to diagram it with his hands. At dusk, the detective stands at mile 42 with the light tech. They watch the new LEDs pulse on, clean, cold, unblinking. He thinks about all the years when the lamp flickered and the road looked like a lie. He thinks about the seam and how it can be a tear or a guide. The light tech says, we fixed the ballast wrong once. The detective says, we fix a lot of things wrong once. They stand there until the moths arrive, frantic and honest, throwing themselves at a truth that burns and saves. Back at the board, 3 index cards in a column. Who else watched? Triangle. We stayed late. He adds a 4th, printed in the same careful block the old sergeant used on the file a lifetime ago. The drill is the crime. He pins it dead center. The room seems to tilt toward it. The seam pulls, just once, as if to say, keep going. The door keeps opening, and on the other side a corridor, they always are, lit now, not by headlines, but by the kind of light that doesn't flicker.